It's on. You can tell.
Good morning, or good afternoon, everyone. We'll give you like a 30-second warning before we officially get started. Okay, not really quieted there down. So thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. We have a number of really interesting presentations and delegations and reports to go through. So welcome to everyone here. I'll start today with a territorial acknowledgement. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather, land which we are broadcasting from today, is the land traditionally cared for by the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We also acknowledge the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today. So the next item is a moment of reflection. So this is a council statement regarding the National Day of Remembrance of the Quebec City Mosque and action against Islamophobia. January 29th was a solemn day. This year, it marked the 6th anniversary of the National Day of Remembrance of the Quebec City Mosque attack and action against Islamophobia. Yesterday, the Waterluminate LED lights in Uptown Waterloo were green in recognition of this day. On January 29, 2017, 6 Muslims, Ibrima Berry, Mamadou Tanu Berry, Khalid Bakasami, Abdel Karim Hussein, Azadine Sofani, and Abu Bakr Thabedi were killed, and 19 others were injured in a hateful act of terror when a person wielding a gun entered the Centre Culturel Islamique de Quebec in Sainte-Foy following evening prayers. This senseless killing was a result of Islamophobia, racism, and bigotry. In memory of the victims and in solidarity with the survivors and those who were injured, the families and friends who lost a loved one, and in recognition of those who put themselves in harm's way to protect others, we pause, reflect, and take action. This remembrance serves as a critical reminder of the work that must be done to eliminate Islamophobia, hate, racism, and all forms of discrimination and prejudice locally and across Canada. A starting point is for residents to join the ongoing Green Square campaign. The Green Square represents the green carpets of the Quebec City Mosque, where the victims last prayed. It symbolizes that the deceased are believed to be spiritually in a green garden, a better place than their experience in the night of the attack. As a council, we will continue to respond and address all forms of hate and racism in our community. And I would just like to briefly also acknowledge that we are a couple of days away from Black History Month, and events and activities and reflections about Black History Month will start at our next council meeting on February 6th and carry throughout the month of February. So just wanted to let everyone know that as well. So moving on, question if anyone has anything to disclosure of pecuniary interest, and if so, the general nature of it. Yes, Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mayor. To you, I'd like to declare a conflict with item 5B, 2023 generally recruited committee appointments, which is in the consent motion. I have my spouse is a nominee on one of the committees.
Thank you. So, does anyone else have a conflict of interest or pecuniary? Yes, Councillor Roach.
Yes, through you, Mayor. I have a similar conflict.
Okay, thank you both for noting that. Okay. So the consent motion. We have looking for a motion. Does anyone have anything that they would like to? Oh, sorry.
I think we need a motion. Do we need to pull that item out, or both Hans and I need to leave right now? And you got the presentation too.
Oh, sorry. I got my wrong. Do I have the wrong agenda? Sorry, I have the wrong agenda up. Sorry about that. Thank you, Ron Ormston, our Commissioner of Integrated Planning and Public Works, who's here to provide, and the directors who've joined him. They are here to provide a presentation regarding their business plan. So we will turn the floor over to you, Ron.
Thank you and good afternoon, Mayor McCabe, members of council, everyone in the chambers this afternoon, and for those that are watching on the city's live stream. It's my pleasure this afternoon to give a very brief overview of the 2023 business plan for the Integrated Planning and Public Works Department. The department is organized into 5 divisions with about 190 employees, and I'm joined this afternoon by each of the respective directors of those divisions. And I'll start with planning, Director of Planning, City Planner, Senior Planner, IPPW, Joel Cotter, Director of Engineering Services, Francis Reyes, Director of City Utilities and Lead Director at the Waterloo Service Center, Lee McDermott, Director of Building Standards and Chief Building Official, Beth Maxwell, and Director of City Transportation Services, Bob Henderson. So in his broadest sense, this department really delivers the traditional essential services that all members of the community rely on. And to that end, because human health, safety, and environmental protection is at the cornerstone of what we do, this department is heavily regulated by provincial legislation and other levels of government at certain times, namely the federal government. And the legislation is contained in the documentation that council would have received as part of the respective business plans for each division. I won't get into that because we could be here all afternoon talking about legislation. Starting with the planning division for some highlights for 2023. Continued work on the city's official plan. The city's official plan is an essential guiding document for the municipality that sets out council's vision for growth and development. The city affordable housing strategy is of utmost importance as well. And of course, an adaptation plan, the 10-point adaptation plan for Bill 23. How the planning division interfaces with the community is pretty broad ranging. In its strictest sense, it's to look at orderly land use, efficient use of land, and through the zoning regime to make sure that there's low conflict between land uses. Beyond that, there's important work that's done on a policy front for the protection of the natural environment and heritage, guiding good quality and high quality urban form and development, and of course responding to provincial directives. And council is well aware of Bill 23, including the province's October 2022 housing pledge, mandate letters that were sent to many municipalities across Ontario, and the city's target is approximately 16,000 new homes by 2031. And Joel and team will have a report for council in the coming weeks about that. Engineering services, there's a few exciting projects that are on the way for this year, namely the long-awaited improvements to the uptown Waterloo Public Square, so shade structures, a nice water feature. Our engineering manual will be before council. It's been about 10 years since that manual was drafted. We're one of the few municipalities that has its own set of engineering standards, and that will be brought forward for council's consideration, as well as a sanitary master plan update that will look at all of the city's wastewater infrastructure and numerous road reconstruction projects, sewer rehabilitation works, creek improvements, and so on. In terms of the interface with the community, engineering services is the capital delivery hub, if you will. So the engineers, project managers, construction inspectors, surveyors, everyone working in Francis's division works hard to deliver essentially infrastructure renewal, right? Looking at the natural environment and creating very nice public spaces as well through landscape architects. The public realm enhancements that are happening in Uptown are also delivered from engineering services. Building standards, the ongoing work will include enforcement of the Building Code Act, the Ontario Building Code. There's enhanced work happening on an e-permitting system, including expansion of online public portal for building permit applications, and engagement and education about the importance of the Ontario Building Code and why building permits are required before construction commences. In terms of the impact and interface with the community, obviously public safety is at the heart of it. Looking at making sure buildings are safe structurally, that they meet proper fire protection regulations and elements of the code, and also things like water efficiency and other aspects. And the enhanced customer service work that's happening through the portal and e-permitting system and BEST team will actually allow applicants to apply for a building permit 24 hours a day once it's up and running in its full sense. So lots of customer service enhancements in building as well. In transportation services, the master plan, the 2020 updated master plan will continue on in its implementation. Maintenance standards for city's roads and sidewalks. We have over 800 kilometers of road and over 550 kilometers of sidewalks in the city. And numerous traffic calming initiatives and management of activities in the right of way. So other construction, issuing work permits and things like that within our right of way. In terms of interface with the community and transportation services, it's to enable all modes of transportation, to promote sustainable transportation, and to consider our efforts to reduce greenhouse gases by enabling enhanced active transportation as well. And of course, mobility for all forms of transportation and the well-being of the community that is really underpinned by our Vision Zero goals in the Transportation Master Plan. And Vision Zero, as Council knows, is to strive for zero injuries and certainly zero fatalities within our transportation network. And lastly, city utilities work will continue on replacing thousands of water meters. The Advanced Water Metering Initiative sees smart meters put in place that can give real-time data on water usage. The supervisory control and data acquisition system, are also known as the SCADA system, that controls our wastewater infrastructure and pumping stations. SCADA system is a combination of computer hardware and software that allows remote control of pumps and valves and sensors and all those things that are connected with wastewater apparatus. And then numerous infrastructure renewal items as well, valve replacement, water main relining, things like that. And no surprises in the community importance here. It's to distribute safe and reliable drinking water, collect wastewater, maintain all our pump stations, manage stormwater, and of course, as climate change is becoming more important, to mitigate erosion, flooding, and property damage. And with that, I'll conclude, and the directors and I'd be happy to answer any questions that council may have this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Ron. And I'll turn it over to council to, that was a very thorough presentation. You had lots of time left on the clock if you came in under time, well under time. So lots of time for questions if we have them. So looking to council if people have any questions. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mayor. Ron, thank you for the presentation and for all the materials that you and your team have put together for the budget. You're getting my question first. Usually I wait till later. So my question is around risk. And what are your biggest areas of risk in what you've put forward, either in terms of what we're going to be doing or what we may not be able to do? Where are our holes?
Well, thanks, Councillor Hamner, for that question. And since I've had most time to prepare, I better not screw it up here, I guess. I would echo what Tim, Philippa, and Mark said about risks in terms of human capital and our ability to recruit quality employees and sustain staff complement over time. It's a competitive labor market, as council knows. So that's one risk. But I think in terms of department-specific risk for integrated planning and public works, I'd characterize it in two ways. So the low frequency, low magnitude risks that happen largely with our capital program. So it's cost overruns, scope creep, environmental contamination, litigation, supply chain issues, things like that, which are more frequent, but of lower risk, lower magnitude. And then on the other end of the scale, the less frequent but higher magnitude risks, things like natural disasters, so flooding, ice storms, tornadoes, things like that, or dramatic legislative change like Bill 23 would be another example. So I think there's the risk in this department, as I see it, is kind of on those two scales.
Thank you. If I can ask a supplementary. I know you talked about the adaptation plan for Bill 23, and I know we'll hear more about that. And so I am curious about the risks associated with it in terms of the plan right now, and that there could be other changes still coming from the legislation. How are we safeguarding, or how are we preparing for that and the changes that may come?
Yeah, well, council did receive the 10-point action plan that Joel and Philippa brought forward last December. I might actually turn that question over to Joel if he's willing to answer it. I think I could go on and on, but let's hear it from a planner.
Sure, thanks, Ron. It's a good question. I think, firstly, we're working on some of the Bill 109 implementation requirements, which were the requirements that spoke to processing applications in a very tight time frame. So we're looking at process efficiencies in that regard. And we're still waiting with respect to Bill 23 to see some of the pieces implemented in terms of the legislation. So we don't know exactly what it means and whether the province will walk back certain pieces, which they've done in other legislation, or whether they will continue to implement as planned. But what we do know is that the legislative framework, in planning at least, is constantly shifting sands. When we know that we have to react and innovate and modernize our system in terms of planning, and we're working to do that. But one of the biggest pieces that we need to do right now is try and work on our staff resources to try and maintain the high volumes of applications that we're currently receiving within this uncertain legislative timeframe. So there's a lot on the go, and you'll start to see some reports coming forward in the not too distant future around the adaptation plan, implementing Bill 23 or Bill 109, process efficiencies. In behind this, the scenes as well, we're working on the streamlined development approvals programs. There's a lot on the go, and we'll start to present that information back to council in the not too distant future here.
Thank you, Mr. Cotter, for linking 109 and 23 together and all the components of it that we need to be mindful of as we make our decisions. That's it for me, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hamner. And yeah, and I've also heard there's more legislation that's to be coming as well. So lots of things to keep our eye on in terms of existing and potentially future provincial legislation. Councillor Wright.
Through you, Chair. I just want to ask quickly, following up on Sanders' comment about risks and your own comment about extreme weather. We've seen just over the last 2 years, extreme precipitation become an overwhelming factor at the municipal level. And I'm just wondering what particular measures we're taking, especially when we think about our stormwater and sanitation systems. Do we have backwater valve subsidies in the works or anything like that for residents who live either adjacent to floodplain or actually on the floodplain, as is actually kind of common in Ward 7?
Yeah, thanks for your question. Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Wright. Thanks for your question, Councillor. It's a good one. I might actually ask Lee to provide his perspective on that. And certainly in I will say though, older built-out areas of the city are top of mind because sub-watershed planning, when it was introduced in the 1990s, Waterloo was one of the first Ontario municipalities that adopted into our planning regime, did a much better job accounting for the newer areas of the city when it came to infiltration targets and mitigating flooding and things like that. But Lee may have something more specific on floodplain properties and backwater valves.
Thank you, Ron. Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Wright. Very good question, and I think one of the key projects that we have on the go right now is a modeling project. It's actually grant funded through the province, and we're actually examining flood risk mitigation all throughout the city. But I do want to take you back to 2021. And in September, we had a very large storm, and that's probably the one you're remembering. And I think by, mathematically, it would work out to be about a 25-year storm, so a pretty significant size storm. And overall, the city did very well. So our stormwater infrastructure throughout the city actually conveyed the water from most of the locations throughout the city. We did have some localized areas of higher water, like I think Weber Street, for example, down by near Marshall was a little, had a little bit of localized flooding, but not significant. I think the only thing that came out of that was some car damage when somebody tried to drive through a lake. But the modeling will really help us to identify, are there locations throughout the city where we have to consider some of these other programs. So backwater valves. We do have a separated storm and sanity infrastructure, so that's good news. So we don't have the same issues as City Hamilton, for instance, where they have a combined system. And that definitely is a lower risk profile for our residents and properties. So.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Lee. Councillor Freeman.
Sorry, sorry, Lee, I'll put you back on the spot. That just reminded me of another question I usually try to ask this time of year. It's kind of how we're doing on our infiltration and inflow of essentially surface water into our sanitary sewers, and how much the differences that we're paying between what we're buying in terms of water and what we're paying to have treated.
Yeah, through you, Mayor, to Councilor Freeman. This past year, we actually did quite well. So we had overall it was a dry year in the summer, very dry in the summer. So financially, we were in better shape last year. But that's something that we're renewing, is that the INI, looking at INI and basically putting together a bit more of a robust program to really dive into certain areas of the city that have problems with infiltration. And that anything that we can do there obviously is a net benefit to revenue, because it's water that we're not paying for, but we pay for when it goes to the wastewater plant. So.
Yeah, so within the capital budget and operating budget, is there some dedicated funds for INI studies, or how are you tackling that one?
Yeah, there's actually two different spots. There is some capital funding for that, and we have a new operating line item that will be coming online this year. Yep. All right. Thank you.
Any further questions, Councillor Freeman? Sure.
Overall, I just wanted to, I haven't said this to everyone, but it goes for everyone. I just wanted to say thank you. I think the business plans were really robust this year. And I really like the tie between the business plans and all of the project sheets. And, to your department in particular, Ron, I've been your liaison for probably 15 years of my 20 years on council. And, Mr. Rapp before you, but more broadly, your team, they carry a fairly significant load in terms of what people see and feel in the city and how they interact with it, whether it's snow plowing or sidewalk clearing. And I know that, Mark, your team has an important role to play as it relates to sidewalk and trail clearing. But more broadly, clean water. When I have a constituent who's really angry with me and asks me directly, what do I pay taxes for? The city's pretty useless to me. I remind them that we provide them with clean water. And that's just such an important thing that we do. And I appreciate the important role your team plays in that, right from planning, application, and determining if there's function, that if the city services can, serve a new development, all the way through to reinvestment and replacement on the other end. So I just wanted to kind of do a shout out for the team, and I appreciate all the hard work that everyone does in the city. And also, I think this business plan reminds us of how our departments are really integrated when it comes to finance and our budget planning, because you rely heavily on all of your advisors from Philippa's team to build your budgets, and then how your team integrates with Mark's team. And the climate change one is one that every team is going to have to carry very strongly, all the way from our strategic initiatives through to how we're managing our assets, whether they're hard assets or lateral, horizontal, whatever the asset is. So thanks again.
Thank you, Councillor Freeman. And clean drinking water is important, and we could provide a whole list if we had time of the important municipal services that our staff provide. So thank you for that. Councillor Bodley, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor McCabe. My question ties into the Bill 23 type stuff, and one of the comments in the adaptation plan was about the potential need for more new planners if some of that legislation was to come to fruition, and I think it was 3 to 5 new planners. And I note that we have a budget request here for a senior development planner, intensification specialist, and one of the comments that's within the description of that budget is around adapting to some of the changing provincial legislation. Is it fair to assume that when we look at potential new planners coming on board in response to these legislative changes, that we're talking about this type of FTE request in future budgets, 3, 4, 5 of these types of planners?
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Bodley. Excellent question. I'm going to let Joel speak a little bit more about the staffing piece longer term. What I will say, Councillor, is that even prior to Bill 23, there was a need for specialist planning capability in the planning division just because of things like complex condominium developments, intense developments that are in locations where they're assembling a lot of properties, and there's issues to consider with respect to all those different parts of the Planning Act that come to bear. But I will turn the mic over to Joel just to answer specifically with the long range piece.
Thank you, Ron. Through you to Councillor Bodley. The position that's in the current budget request is actually stemming from Bill 109. And as you know, we have very limited greenfield land. We're going in and up through intensification. And with the condensed timeframes now in the Planning Act to process applications, the planning division's pretty lean. So we need more staff, and particularly staff that are directed at intensification, particularly when we're seeing, at council a few nights ago, the scale of the property up at the Waterloo end, for example. So that position was really driven out of Bill 109. Certainly in future budgets, we're going to have to address Bill 23, and particularly if continuing downloading from the Conservation Authority and the region are shifted to the local tier, then we're going to have to pick up that workload and that work volume, which will require FTEs. What that exactly looks like, we're not 100% sure at this point in time, but we are actively analyzing it, and we'll report to council at our first opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks, Joel. Maybe I'll stick around there for a second. I got to follow up. So, first off, I guess it's important, I guess, to acknowledge that at least in part, this request is already coming from the downloading of provincial legislation down to the city, and this is a not insignificant budget request. It's 150 grand, and so I guess that's kind of where if I know you don't like to speculate here, but are we talking about 3 to 5 planners at this sort of clip in terms of what budget we'd be having to contemplate in the future? And obviously I'm not going to hold you to this when we're talking about the next 3-year budget and how we do that, but we're talking about this type of cost associated with it that we're going to have to think of, or are we talking about more junior planners, or maybe it isn't totally fair for us to figure that out at this stage?
That's a very difficult question through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Bodley. Certainly, I think a number of the positions will be more senior level, and it expands beyond just the planning division as well. For example, if we have additional pieces downloaded, legal services is going to need additional resources, and those are, not junior positions at the end of the day. But the type of work that is looking at being downloaded is technical work, often associated with kind of engineering level or senior planning level type analysis. So yes, a number of FTEs for senior level positions, as well as potentially some junior level FTEs around complex fee calculations, right? The continued modifications of development charges, parkland charges, CBC charges, it's getting to the point where they are becoming extremely challenging to calculate, and a lot of pieces are going into them. And so again, building up some of that zoning level analysis, and when we're clearing building permits, to make those processes work more efficiently and smoothly, we need dedicated resources to do those complex calculations and analysis at the end of the day. So there's an array of positions, but certainly a number of them will be senior level positions.
That's great. Thanks, Joel. I have other questions, not necessarily for Joel, if I can continue.
Yeah, I'll just check in if on this slide. No, okay, go ahead, Councillor Bodley.
Okay, thank you. And thanks again, Joel. That was a tough question. I appreciate how you answered that. So through you, Mayor McCabe, my next questions are about the transportation division. So one is just a comment, and I just wanted to highlight that in the collaborators section of the transportation business plan there, I think I would in future like to see just a comment, our friends at STSWR as a pretty key collaborator for us in terms of what we deliver in terms of safe travel into schools. So just a comment there.
Councillor, just maybe you could explain that acronym.
Sorry, STSWR is Student Transportation Services Waterloo Region. Nailed it. I always forget it. They are key collaborators or for us, and I know that. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying maybe I think it would be valuable to have it listed there as a key collaborator because they work with us in terms of school travel planning, how to make active transportation. Working with parents and the school to facilitate active transportation and school bus planning, et cetera, and probably a whole host of other things. I don't work for them, so I don't know exactly everything that they do, but I know that they're a key collaborator of ours, and I just wanted to highlight that. My question is around traffic calming initiatives, which is one of the key initiatives in the business plan here. And I know that there's a capital budget line item there, but I was hoping or wondering if maybe you could speak to, there are 3 traffic technicians that are proposed in the operating budget. And I'm wondering if you could maybe speak a little bit more to how important those positions are in terms of our ability to implement some of the traffic calming initiatives that council would like to see.
Through Mayor McCabe to Councillor Bodley. I'll get Bob to provide a more fulsome answer, but just at a high level, one of the traffic technicians is a staff association position, so more office-based work, and the other 2 are QP members who would be essentially dealing with winter control in the winter and signs and things in the summer, but specifically related to the traffic calming piece. I'll let Bob provide a little bit more context, Councillor.
Thank you, Ron. Through you to Councillor Bodley. The QP positions are an important position. There's 2 positions being recommended. And just as an example, there's an upcoming speed management plan recommending 30-kilometer speed neighborhoods throughout the city that will add a number of signs to the city in the thousands of signs. And that is a comprehensive program that will require additional staff, hence the reason for asking for 2 new positions in that group. There's other traffic calming initiatives like street signs, the Bollard program that require staff resources to implement those signs. So those are just a couple of good examples of the resources that are required to implement those programs.
Very good. So just through you, Mayor McCabe, in closing, those positions are very important in terms of our ability to implement some of these traffic calming initiatives.
Through you to Councillor Bodley, absolutely.
Thank you, Councillor. Other questions from any other councillors? Seeing none. Actually, I just have a couple questions. I'll start with you, Bob, while you're there, unless Ron wants to take them. But my questions were around the transportation and the Vision Zero. I was just wondering, and I'm new, so I'm just wondering what changes have been implemented over the past, maybe say 2 or 3 years, and what you're planning to do to reach that goal, and how you also work with the region on that.
Yeah, certainly. There's the pillars of the 3 E's: application, engineering, enforcement, and education. So we're partnering with our partners at the region and Waterloo Regional Police Services and the other cities that we're collaborating on in terms of implementing new strategies to reduce collisions and injuries and deaths on our roads. We're also partnering with the University of Waterloo to help determine programs going forward that can be initiatives to reduce those deaths and injuries on our roads as related to roadway collisions. And we're actually, along with that, we're starting to enhance our programs to focus our attention more on the active transportation side too as well, because as we all know, our most vulnerable people that get injured on our roads are cyclists and our pedestrians. So we're concentrating some of our programs on addressing those users of our roadways as well.
Thank you. Would some of those strategies, I know you just said about the active transportation piece, but would some of those other strategies involve traffic, like slowing drivers down? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, absolutely. There's a number of initiatives that are meant to slow drivers down. Obviously, there's a very strong correlation associated between speed and injuries caused by speed. So there's programs that we're concentrating on expanding and working with our partners at the region, including the automated speed enforcement program. We're wanting to reduce speeds in school zones, get kids out walking to and from school more often. And there's a number of programs like that.
Okay, thank you so much. I just had a question about green development standards as well, so I don't think that's you, but I understand the city has a public, like we have our own green development standards, but is it possible, or are we looking at private, like green development standards for private companies?
Through you, Mayor, that's a great question. And I think, intrinsically, the city has been trying to promote environmentally sensitive development for a long time. And whether directly or indirectly through whatever enabling legislation, we've been doing it on a basis of partnership with the industry and encouraging it. In terms of specific standards and legislations, I'm going to have to let Joel or Beth take that one, who are a little bit closer to what our authority is. Yeah.
I thought it might have been a Beth question to save Joel some of the time at the mic.
I'll take a crack at it. In response, Mayor McCabe, we currently don't have green development standards that are outward facing. So we do for the city, but not outward facing. We have partnered with WR Community Energy, who is working collaboratively with the major cities in the region and the region itself, along with all the major utility players, to work on developing a common green development standard that can be at least a template or a base for each of the local municipalities. So that work is in progress. But really beyond that, the building code determines what the requirements are for construction, and Beth can certainly speak to it. But the challenge will be, while we have green development standards for the industry, it's, at this point, more of an encouragement than a change to the building code. And whether the province, again, continues to take steps towards encouraging more climate-friendly construction, time will tell, but we're hopeful that that's the direction it will go, and it will give municipalities some authority to implement some of these green development standards in a more substantive way going forward. But certainly, we'll look at it through the site plan process where we have some authority to encourage design for new buildings through that site planning level analysis. We'll certainly be looking to enhance energy efficiencies and green construction practices to the extent that we can within the current legislative restrictions.
Thank you. And like the building code standards are minimums, correct? Are we able to go beyond those I'm just wondering what our legislative options are in terms of going beyond building code minimums.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. So yes, building codes are minimum standards for energy efficiency. The Ontario Building Code is based off of the national, and they are regularly reviewing energy efficiency requirements through proposed code change amendments. We look at and comment on those as well. So we can't require anything beyond what's in the regulatory code at this time, but we do look at kind of what's coming in the pipeline and can provide comment in support of those proposed changes.
Okay, thanks. It's a really slow process though, isn't it? Like changing the building code, isn't it? Like a really slow process.
It's been much faster.
Councillor Freeman, back to you.
Sorry, just still in that same
Sure,
vein.
go ahead.
So about the green building standards, I guess just to signal my turns, this is something I'm really going to be pushing on this term, because the City of Toronto put them in, and they're using the site plan terms and conditions within the Toronto Act, and it's verbatim in the Municipal Act what's in the Toronto Act as it relates to site plan. So I don't see any barrier to Waterloo Region actually bringing in exactly the same tiered standards as they have in Toronto, because if someone appeals us, they are going to bring down Toronto because it's going to set a precedent. So I don't really think we should be playing around this game anymore, saying that we don't have jurisdiction, we don't have this, we don't have that. We have exactly the same tools in the Municipal Act as Toronto has in the Toronto Act, and I think that we need to pull the trigger on this if we're going to be serious about climate change. And so I'm just putting that on the table in plain language. Yes, the building code is a minimum standard, and whatever. What I'm more worried about is Bill 23 is going to pull the plug on the green building standards in Toronto, which is just going to take everyone down. But right now, I am willing to go to a hearing over this because we need to stop hiding behind, tools that we can't change. So yeah, the building code is a minimum code. NSERC and their ability to push the national building code down is looking tough. So I don't see that happening. But I just want to signal a turn on that particular one so that everyone knows when we get into this strategic planning conversation, I'm going to be pushing on that. But I don't necessarily need a comment, but I think we need to take that away and really think seriously about it.
Thank you, Councillor Freeman. And yeah, I know Sandy Little's in the back there, so she's taking note of that. And you've put your cards on the table as far as that goes, Councillor Freeman. And Councillor Rowe, you have a question?
Yes, and sorry, I'm going to call Bob back. I had just written some notes that I reviewed from your comments to what Mayor McCabe was asking about reduced speed. And in terms of strategies, aside from reduced speed, I'm just wondering if you can give us an overview, if like speed bumps, yield signs, like those kinds of things, and what that would look like.
Yeah, certainly through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor. Our traffic calming program certainly includes vertical and horizontal deflection techniques as speed humps, chicanes, and included in that program are what I referred to before as the knockdown speed signs, which are now being deployed further across the province with other municipalities, because municipalities are obviously finding a benefit to that program in terms of speed reduction. But together, all those, it's just not one magic silver bullet. It's a number of initiatives that help calm traffic throughout the city.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Any further questions, Council? Seeing none, thank you very much, Ron and your team. Really appreciate the presentation, the work that each of you and through you, your staff are doing to serve our city and many of the critical services that our residents rely on. So thanks so much, and we'll look forward to hearing from you again through the budget process.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, so we will move back to the consent item, and we have two councillors who've indicated that they have a conflict with report B. So if we just set that, oh, sorry, go ahead, Councillor.
Might I suggest that we just separate the two issues
Yeah,
anyways?
I was just going to say.
I would like the opportunity to make a comment, if I could, with regard to the SCADA modernization and how that links into the budget.
Okay,
If
so.
that's okay, can we just pull both and just
So you want to
deal
pull
with them
both
separate?
A and B? Anyone? Okay. Yeah, and then does anyone want to pull report C? Nope. Okay, so can we, through the can we get a motion then for report C, the City Regional Parkade Agreement Extension? Okay, moved by Councillor Bodley and seconded by Councillor Freeman. So that is pass. Oh, and yeah, sorry. Sorry. All in favor? All right, that is unanimous. So moving on then to report number 5A, the SCADA modernization recommendations. You have a question, Councillor Freeman?
No, I just wanted to point out to council that even though this report kind of deals with strategic direction at this time, it also will lead into the budget, and it'll be part of an enterprise budget. So I just wanted to draw that to your attention, that even though this report is kind of a standalone right now, it does link into the broader budget process.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments on? Yes, go ahead, Councillor Wright. For questions.
I just have a quick question about the SCADA report. In the report, it does talk about the leak detection being a future consideration. And given the context of Hamilton's recent discovery, I just wanted to ask about, can we get a little bit of context on what the current status of leak detection is and what future consideration actually means in that context? Thanks.
Oh, sorry, just before you answer, you said Hamilton, I just wondered if you want to
Oh,
provide a bit
sorry.
more
Yeah,
context.
there was a 26-year leak in Hamilton.
Yeah.
Just, it's sewage right into Lake Ontario. So it's a, in the news and kind of a topical issue at the municipal level.
Yeah. So thank you. Through Mayor McCabe, Councillor Wright, we do have a leak detection system, although that's primarily or exclusively, I should say, on our drinking water system. Through the SCADE initiative, though, we are building in future phases to bring in more monitoring of our wastewater system as well, which can start to potentially address some of those issues, as well as our storm system. So we're trying to create more of a platform for all three systems to monitor flows and potential areas of flooding and risk that you've just outlined.
Do you have a follow-up? Go ahead.
Yes, sorry, I have a follow-up.
No, that's fair.
I'm just also wondering if you can comment on just the reliance on Rogers and Bell in the system, especially considering the Rogers outage that we had last year and sort of what the redundancies are in the IoT approach.
Okay.
Thank you.
So through Mayor McCabe again, thanks for the question. We do have some redundancy built in. Part of the upgrade, we're upgrading the operator interface terminals at each station, and each one of those OITs, as we refer to them, will have their own communications ability. So if there is an outage with the central server at the service center, we can still actually receive alarms. If there's a full-on outage, it is important to note that the pumping stations do not require communications to operate. They'll still function as they're designed to. But we do have, a SOP that allows our staff to rotate through each station during periods of outages to monitor each station. So I think one of the things we are looking at is actually also building in and having a landline to each station as well on top of the cellular network, and that would build in the full-on redundancy that you're wondering about.
Thank you very much for that detail.
Any other questions, council, on this? Okay, seeing none, I would request someone to move. Councillor Freeman, and is there a seconder? Councillor Wright, all in favor? That is unanimous. All right, so we will move to item 5B, where we have two councillors, Hamner and Roach, who have declared a conflict. So we'll just give them a second to leave the room. Thank you. Councillor Freeman, did you say you had a question on this? No, okay. I thought Councillor. Right. Okay. Does anyone have any questions, comments they wanted to make on the recruited committee appointments? Nope. Seeing none. Do I have a mover of this? Councillor Rowe and Councillor Bodley is seconding it. All in favor? That is unanimous. And thank you, Julie, for calling the councillors back in. We'll just give them a minute to come back. Yeah, you had a nice stretch of your legs there. Okay, so thank you. Welcome back, councillors. So item 5C, the City Regional Parkade Agreement Extension. Any questions, comments on that, council? Oh, no, I thought we pulled them apart. Oh, sorry, we did it in the consent, sorry. Pardon? It stayed in, that's correct. Okay. So moving on then to staff report, the 2023-2026 Strategic Plan Municipal Services Satisfaction Assessment. I will ask Sandy Little to introduce our guests today and the presentation. So over to you, Sandy. Thank you very much to our guests from Deloitte for attending today as well.
Good afternoon, Mayor McCabe and the rest of council, as well as staff. Really excited to be here to officially kick off our council engagement on the new 2023 to 2026 strategic plan. And so I certainly won't cut into our presentation time because we've got lots to cover, but I will pass it over to Deloitte, who is our consultant for the new strategic plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy, and welcome, Sarah. We're, I think, all very excited to hear this report.
Thank you, Mayor McCabe. Your Worship, Mayor McCabe, councillors of the City of Waterloo, those attending in person and those attending online. It's really a pleasure to be here today to begin our conversations around the Corporate Strategic Plan for 2023 to 2026. Today is the first of many conversations we will have on this topic. Today, we are reviewing the results of our resident survey in more detail, and then later we will be having a hot off the campaign trail discussion. There are many other activities happening at the same time for the strategic plan, and we will be reviewing those as well in a later presentation. But for the moment, we are going to be focusing on the resident survey. So just to review quickly, the goal of a strategic plan is to provide a roadmap for the next term of council. And so this strategic plan, when completed, will reflect the consensus and agreement of council on the direction and strategic priorities that the city will then implement. And so this is a very important process to send a signal for the direction of the city over the coming years. And it's very important to consider community engagement, and especially resident engagement, and understand the perspectives of the community in this process. So in a strategic plan, we want to understand where we are today, where do we want to be, and how are we going to get there. There we are. And so this management tool will align the divisional business plans, direct connectivity with the budget processes, and become a set of prioritized goals and objectives that can be measured and monitored. It's really about accountability for the vision of council over the period of the plan. So now we'll talk more about the resident survey. So the resident survey reached 535 residents through phone interactions, both landlines and cell phones, and residents who reported being over the age of 18 years. We did ask some important questions this time that had not been asked in previous community surveys around whether those who responded were part of different equity-deserving groups and communities. And we were quite pleased with the results overall. These are a good indication of the diversity of those who responded to the survey, but by no means are we relying only on a phone survey to have a representative voice within the results of the strategic plan. This is only one piece. With that said, having these percentages in place, they are generally reflective of some of these metrics for the City of Waterloo. On to the results of the survey. This is really an exceptional result, receiving over 90% for respondents who felt somewhat satisfied or very satisfied that the City of Waterloo as a place to live is something that they're satisfied about. Typically, we do see figures for this type of question in the 80s, and it really just shows that the City of Waterloo is doing some very important things right for the community. Equally here, where residents who responded provided an over 90% satisfaction rate with the quality of life in Waterloo. And again, this is an unusual result compared to the results in other communities. 85% of respondents felt they received good value or very good value from the taxes they pay to the City of Waterloo. We do typically see a bit of a drop-off at this point when we start talking about paying taxes, that the ratings do reduce somewhat, but this is still in the mid-80s and a very good result. We would say that there would be no significant issues raised by a figure like this. And here again, 79% of respondents were satisfied with the way that the City of Waterloo spent its budget. And this is, again, higher than typical for other communities with similar questions. Anything over 70, we would say would be a result that would be respectable and not really be calling into question any major issues. This kind of decreases as compared to the 90% figures is typical. So now we go on to service satisfaction. So there were high satisfaction rates with the services and programs provided by the City of Waterloo at 79%. And so here we want to understand a little bit more in detail what some of those satisfaction ratings were, where they were coming from. And so there's some more detail on the following slides. Here, I know this is a small text, although council has received the details in a package. But these satisfaction rates are overall high. Anything over about 70% is considered to be a positive satisfaction rate. And so there were a few areas where we would say maybe require more investigation and will be investigated through the other areas of the study research. And some of those indicated include affordable housing and bicycle lanes would be the two that we would say are things that we're going to be looking more into. Here is, this is a calculation that we do to try and understand the level of influence that the specific service satisfaction rating plays to the overall satisfaction. And so what we see here is overall a performance score, and then there's an algorithm that determines how much of an influence that score of performance had on each individual's respondents' overall satisfaction with the service levels in Waterloo. So what we see here then are the priority ranks, which give us a sense of not just how well a particular area is performing, but just how meaningful that has been to those who responded to the survey in terms of their overall sense of satisfaction. And so then again, we see affordable housing, road maintenance and repair, bicycle lanes, and climate change action are some areas that were very meaningful to residents, and also had some kind of a performance indicator that we want to look at. So now we move on to communications and engagement. So 73% of respondents agreed that the municipality provided sufficient opportunities and information. And so this is a good result. Something that can always be worked on is different modes of communication and outreach to the community and the effectiveness of that communication. Again, this is an area that typically wouldn't score very highly. What we find in general is that residents, when asked, often would like different kinds or more of more communication. And so this is an area that typically has this type of score. So again, something that can be worked on, but is broadly an area that needs work across the board. So this is a really interesting result and quite high, higher than we expected, to be honest, in this type of a question. Among residents who are aware of the digital services provided by the city, 84% were somewhat satisfied or very satisfied. And so the increase in the use and demand for digital services is something that we've seen broadly coming out of the pandemic. And this really shows that there are some good initiatives, and those who are using the digital services are finding them useful. So it's just in general a positive indicator about the digital services that are currently offered by the city. And so that is our presentation. So happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. So you're the second presentation that's come in under time, so we appreciate that. So yeah, we'll take council questions. I don't know, Sandy, I just wanted to see if you had anything else you wanted to add. Nope. Okay. So Councillor Rowe, and then we'll go to Councillor Freeman.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was very informative. I'm just wondering, the number 535 participants, if that is sort of a standard average for the size of city, for example, and how that compares to other cities in terms of response.
Mm-hmm. The figure, it provides a representative sample, and it's also balanced by ward as well as by demographic indicators to ensure that the sample is representative, and we consider it to be significant representation of the views of the community. Apologies, through the mayor to Councillor Rowe.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Over to Councillor Freeman.
Can I trouble you to go back to that slide where you looked at the relative importance of
Yes,
each
certainly.
piece? So maybe you can unpack this a little bit more on the derived importance. So So when I look at affordable housing, if I understand this correctly, more broadly, people felt that we were kind of not meeting the bar at 32% for affordable housing. But when they compared affordable housing against all the other things we did, they ranked it at about a 6.4 to 10. Is it out of 10? Is that the scale for the derived importance?
Through the mayor to Councillor Freeman, the derived importance is not actually a question that's specifically asked to the
I
respondent.
understand. It's
Yes,
an
okay.
algorithm.
Yes.
But is it
Yeah.
still out of 10?
So it's a relative measure. So yes, it's a out of 10 scale at a maximum.
Okay. So if I were to look at this, I would say that people said our road maintenance and repair kind of didn't meet their expectations on performance, and they actually rate it as a really high and important service within the cities. I'm reading that correctly?
Yes, so it indicates that the performance is rated at 59%, and that the overall the relative importance that, or the priority that respondents placed on it, how much it influenced their overall satisfaction was quite high.
Okay.
Does that?
Yeah, I guess I just find this interesting that affordable housing came up as a priority rank of 1 when the derived importance was as low as it was, as opposed to something like road and maintenance repair, the derived importance was so high. So, but that's good. I think you've answered my question, and I appreciate that, because I just wanted to unpack that a bit more.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Other questions? Just a quick question, a couple from me.
Of course, Mayor.
When you said you were the people that you were interviewing and the respondents were above the age of 18.
Yes.
I just wonder how you capture anything to do with youth in our community.
Yeah, very fair question. So the survey, or this particular survey, is only part of the overall work that we do. And certainly there are perspectives that can't be captured in a representative phone survey. And one of those, a great example of those, is the perspectives of youth. And so we have parallel work happening to reach out to community partners that are active with youth within the city to understand their vision for the future of the city, and to gather that information and work with those partners to be able to reflect that unique perspective within the survey. We're also doing that with seniors within the community, as well as equity deserving groups in partnership with IIARAE.
Okay, thank you. That was going to be my follow-up question was, what partners were you going to work with? And are you going to try and make sure that you balance, with the balance that you set out in one of the, I think your first or second slide that indicated sort of the breakdown,
Yes.
if you were going to reflect that as well when you talk to youth. So do you have a sense of what partners you're going to work with on that?
Yeah, Sandy?
Yeah, great question, Mayor. So just to expand a little bit more in terms of that youth engagement piece, we recognize and heard from the community that as part of the last strat plan, we may not have done as much engagement as what we were hoping to do with regards to youth and students. And so one thing that we wanted to do differently with regards to this strategic plan is really reach out to people that maybe did not feel that they were fully engaged as part of the previous process. So as Sarah mentioned, working with her and with Tassine, who's also from Deloitte, as well as our own staff team, just working on recognizing what areas can we focus on. So one of the areas is youth, of course. And so we've been having some ongoing conversations with the Children and Youth Planning Table. So working closely with them, looking to see what are the best ways that we can actually engage our youth in a meaningful way, and not just a random survey that maybe doesn't reach the people that we really need to reach. And so one of the suggestions in terms of engaging youth, and that's part of our next stage of community engagement, as much as I'd love to do everything all at the same time, quickly realizing that that's not possible. So that's kind of the next phase, as I kind of explain it with regards to engagement, is youth. And so one of the recommendations from the Children and Youth Planning Table was to use some of the data coming from their impact survey that was done. I believe it was in 2021, and they've disaggregated that data. So we've actually been using that as part of our background information. So that's one way. The next way is, can we work with some of the existing groups that we already work with here at the city, there's no sense in reinventing the wheel. So if we already have relationships, I know that there's certain programs through the Waterloo Public Library and certain groups that we already have in place. Is there an opportunity to engage them in that way? Rather than doing a very wide blast, is there a way to do targeted and meaningful engagement with our youth? So right now we're exploring different avenues to be able to do that. With regards to students, we also recognize that we have a very high post-secondary student population. So what are ways that we can engage them in a meaningful way as well? So certainly we've had some conversations through Wilfrid Laurier University and some of the work that we're doing with the Laurier City Hub. Do students actually even want to be engaged as part of our strategic planning process? And some of the work that came out of the work that they were doing last year showed that yes, they do, but we really need to time it well for them. Beginning of semester is ideal. Going to them in the middle of the semester doesn't work. So it's all these things that we're learning as part of this process. So we'll be reaching out to the student union reps as well. And in addition to that, we also did strategic partner outreach interviews. So we identified key strategic partners within our community from various sectors, including education. So how do they feel a sense of belonging within our community? We asked very high level topics or questions so that we can get more information. So as Sarah said, the MSSA is just a very small component of the overall engagement. And so we'll be looking to do more of that targeted engagement in the coming weeks.
Thank you so much. That's a great answer. Lots of information. And Councillor Hanmer has a follow-up based on that.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. And thank you, Sandy. Just if you could, did we give any consideration to our affiliate groups in terms of reaching the youth?
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Hanmer, that's a really great suggestion. It's certainly something that we can explore. Certainly going to be working closely with our neighborhood groups through that team, but that's a really good suggestion that in order to reach our youth, that would be a good avenue for us to explore. So I'll make sure that I take that away as something that we can explore further.
Thank you. Happy to help with that if you need.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, we do happen to have two people on council who are highly connected to a couple of our affiliate groups. Yeah, I was thinking along the same lines of like going out to places like arenas and soccer fields and places like that. So, yeah, I think that's a great place to go as well. Sorry, did you have another question, Councillor Rowe? No, any other questions? I just to comment more than anything, it's interesting to receive this. You know, I feel like we're, in high school and we got really great marks, and our parents are going to be really proud of us. But I was a little surprised when I saw how high the digital services piece rated, particularly given that just last week we had report from Valencia, if I'm saying that correctly, around some of the ways that we can improve our digital services and our customer service strategy. So it's interesting to get these back to back to see that. But it's also really, I'm really glad to know that the city is looking at the customer service strategy and digital service strategy, because I think, as you said, it's going to be, it's important. As a city, we want to be seen as being very responsive and have lots of ways for citizens and residents to connect with us. So, but yeah, I just found that an interesting data point.
Yeah. I can provide a bit more context, Mayor.
Sure.
Yeah, so this particular question, the way that it was structured, it was among residents who were aware of the digital services. So there was a step, right, where this is an audience that is aware of the services already. When we think about digital service delivery, there's also consideration for those who may not be aware or who may not be accessing or may not have easy access to digital services. So it's like anything with surveys. They give us indications, they give us clues, they give us things to explore further. And I think that this is a good example of that. There's, to me, the most that I would interpret it as saying is that there are a group of residents who have had very positive experiences with the digital services, and that is a very good indicator that there's something positive happening, but there's possibly more questions and more investigation that needs to happen to understand the implications for a strategy.
Great, thank you. And that's prompted Councillor Wright. Over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you. I'm just wondering if you have a data point for the awareness, because I was, when I first saw this slide, I was like, oh, awareness. What is the awareness?
Sorry, what did you say? You asked
Yeah.
if there was a data point for writing?
A data point to measure the awareness.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yes, so there would be, through the mayor to Councillor Wright, there would be some indicator. I don't have it on hand, but I can follow up with that information if you're interested.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
and we can certainly look at that as we look into our analysis, because I think it is a very important point.
great. Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, thank you very much to both of you for your presentation, and to Sandy as well, of course. So looking for a mover and a seconder to receive this report. Councillor Hamner is moving and Councillor Freeman seconding it. Sorry, I don't know why I stumble over this part all the time. All in favor. That is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you very much again.
Thank you.
So moving on here, the next report is a summary of the January 10th, 2003 proposed 2023 budget hybrid public information meeting. And we have our Commissioner of Corporate Services, Philippa Reynolds, Brad Witzel, and Tony Ivaroni here. Thank you very much for preparing this report. They do not have a presentation. So Council, just looking to you to see if you had any questions, or, sorry, Natalia, do we start with the delegations? We start with questions. Okay, yeah, we'll start with the questions from Council first, sorry. No? Okay, let me just, so I'm just checking my own, okay. Yeah, so seeing no questions from Council, then we will start with the delegations. And the first up, we have Daisy and Andre Arsenault, who are residents of Waterloo. Thank you for coming today. Welcome. And did you have a presentation, or no? Okay. All right, great. You have up to 10 minutes. Oh, you do have a presentation. Okay. Thank you for loading that. And you can begin anytime, and you have 10 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mayor McKay.
Andre will be focusing his portion of the presentation on national resources. So I start my presentation by talking about land acknowledgements. Land acknowledgements are now common practice in Waterloo. I believe everyone here would agree that reciting a land acknowledgement is not enough. How are we truly honoring and caring for our city that is situated on the land traditionally cared for by the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral peoples? So in the City of Waterloo Council's meeting on October 21st, 2019, City of Waterloo staff presented Waterloo's response to several calls to action to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. So call to action number 92 under Business and Reconciliation reads, we call upon the corporate sector in Canada to adopt the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as a reconciliation framework, and to apply its principles, norms, and standards in corporate policy and core operational activities, including Indigenous peoples and their lands and resources. This would include, but not be limited to, the following. So there are actually 3 points, but I'm only going to focus on the 2 points. 1, commit to meaningful consultation, building respectful relationships, and obtaining the free, prior, and informed consent of Indigenous peoples before proceeding with economic development projects. 2, ensuring that Aboriginal peoples have equitable access to jobs, training, and education opportunities in the corporate sector, and that Aboriginal communities gain long-term sustainable benefits from economic developmental projects. The staff response was the following. Staff will explore ways of incorporating Indigenous inclusion and work done related to economic development. My question for you today is, when it comes to the upcoming budget, how have you included Waterloo's Indigenous Initiatives and advocate Brian Hill in the budget planning? How is Waterloo's budget supporting Indigenous peoples to have equitable access to jobs, training, and education opportunities in the corporate sector? When we plan for Indigenous people within our communities, we plan for all people in the community. This is reconciliation in action. So my advocacy today is in support of a City of Waterloo snow clearing plan. The clearing of city-owned sidewalks supports an inclusive and active transportation network in Waterloo. Snow clearing supports equitable access to jobs, training, and education opportunities in the corporate sector and enables all community members to gain long-term sustainable benefits from economic development. In 2012, long before the Waterloo Region Light Rail Transit, LRT, was built, I participated in the Central Transit Corridor Community Building Strategy sessions that Urban Strategies led as leading consultants for the planning and building of the LRT here in Waterloo Region. Staff from all regional municipalities participated, stakeholders like developers, accessibility advocates, transit advocates, and community members like myself participated in these consultation meetings, which I strategically avoided the camera, by the way. We identified the best ways to make use of this billion-dollar investment. We highlighted how important it is to enhance mobility for all users along the transit corridor. The results of these consultations are compiled in a document called Central Transit Corridor Community Building Strategy. I invite you to revisit this document. Tax dollars paid a significant amount of money and time for it to be created for the benefit of this moment with our LRT in full operation. So this slide is a screenshot of page 17 in that document, and that's why it's such poor quality. 2 weeks ago, Council heard from a delegation that presented recent census data on the percentage of the population that walk in Waterloo neighborhoods. This slide shows the data for Waterloo, Kitchener, and Cambridge from 2006 census data. Active transportation users live close to the core, so that data is still consistent today. We're a household of 5 people in our family. We have 3 young adult children who are encouraged to walk or take transit to and from their daily activities, despite our family having 2 vehicles. We chose to live in the core as we love a walkable lifestyle and enjoy taking transit. My kids love the LRT system and will even walk past the closest station just to walk to their favorite station. Having options is part of the beauty of living in the core. My Uptown North neighborhood is a diverse neighborhood of students, seniors, a co-op community, new Canadians, and low-income community members. We love our diverse community. Although we've seen a significant increase in condominiums being built over the 26 years of living in Uptown Waterloo, there's not necessarily a big increase in vehicular traffic, but I've noticed a significant increase in pedestrian traffic. So one of my neighbors was unable to attend today's meeting but wanted to delegate, so he asked if I could take a moment to read his comments that were sent to our neighborhood email group. While I read this, I do have some recent photos of Waterloo sidewalks that were shared with me by community members. My neighbor is Stephen Herzog. He shares, quote, "As we try to make the city more transversable for people of different ages and physical abilities, the issue of sidewalk clearing has become more important. While some residents are able to clear their sidewalks, not everyone has the ability or time to do so. Furthermore, there are many rental properties in the university areas where the snow is often not cleared by property owners. While not an ideal solution, could council consider whether ward-by-ward implementation could be possible? Wards that want city snow clearing could have that service and pay an additional levy analogous I can't say that word for some reason, to a business improvement area or BIA levy. So my invitation for you today also is to please implement your snow clearing strategy in this budget, to support an inclusive active transportation network in Waterloo. I turn the time over to Andre now.
So thank you. On January 1st, 2016, the world officially began implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the United Nations transformative plan of action that addresses urgent global challenges over the next 15 years. The plan is based on 17 specific Sustainable Development Goals, and the Sustainable Development Goals fact sheets are an example of how Statistics Canada supports the reporting of the global goals for sustainable development. Progress on the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals is a shared responsibility. It requires a whole of government and a whole of society effort. The 2030 agenda highlights the needs to address today's most pressing social, economic, and environmental challenges. Canada will continue to take action driven by intersectional, gender-responsive, whole-of-society approach to ensure our efforts are effective, impactful, and leave no one behind. Today, I want to highlight two of those goals. These are goals 11 and 16. So if you could, we could see on slide 16 that this slide shows that the 11th goal to make our cities inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable is tracked by the percentage of the population within a range of public transport stops. In Ontario, 75% of the population live within 500 meters of a public transport stop. This needs to be accommodated by having viable walking paths. This accommodation to those stops will allow for an increased use and lead towards achieving our sustainable development goals. In this next slides with the goal indicator, we can see that the proportion of Canadians who report feeling safe walking alone in their neighborhood after dark is on a downward trend, especially considering that it gets dark at 5 p.m. approximately in the winter. This has even more impact during the winter months. With increased snow removals for sidewalks, there will be more eyes on the streets and we will better adhere to good SEPTA design principles. So let's get the Government of Canada working for our community. Through the Permanent Public Transit Program, the Government of Canada will provide $14.9 billion in funding over 8 years, with $3 billion per year starting in 2026, which is of course on the horizon. But the funding builds on the $20 billion in funding already available for transit across the country through the public transit stream of the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. These investments will reduce greenhouse gas emissions, provide health benefits, and better serve disadvantaged groups, including women, seniors, youth, persons with disabilities, visible minorities, and those with low income. The $14.9 billion provides funding for the major projects as well as for zero emissions transit funds, Active Transportation Fund, and Rural Transit Solutions Fund. So with all of these funding opportunities available and a focus on building sustainable and inclusive communities, I'm confident that the City of Waterloo is able to find the right solution now to help us have safer and better pedestrian-friendly transportation infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you both. And again, you're the third presentation that's come in under time. So thank you very much for the information. And so turning it over to Council, over to Councillor Freeman.
So I just wanted to say thank you. And I wanted to make sure, I'm not sure if you're aware, but when we did our last strategic plan, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals were actually a part of that plan. And that when we had gone deeper into looking at them, that we found the ISO, International Organization for Standardization, had a similar listing, and it also had performance criteria. So we'd actually leaned into that even more than the United Nations pieces. So I just thought I'd bring that to your attention in case you're kind of looking to say how we did against those goals, that there's information available on that. And Sandy will have it available if you wanted more information.
If I may respond to that, Mayor?
Yeah, go ahead.
We wanted to highlight those indicators because we feel that the correlation between not being able to walk in our sidewalks during snow time is not meeting that goal.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Freeman. Other comments or questions regarding the snow clearing? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Rowe.
Through you, Mayor, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm wondering, just from a resident perspective, what you feel would be an appropriate time to have snow cleared, like just as an example of the snow event. I'm just curious about what that looks like for you.
That's a really good question. When I think about my kids heading to university, heading to different placement opportunities, school, they need to get there the day of. They don't have an opportunity to wait for 3 days later, 24 hours later. They need to get there ASAP, just as, as we focus on driving people to get there. And given we have 3 kids often going in 3 different directions, including our own different directions, we can't accommodate driving everyone in 5 different directions. And so it's important to have an ASAP approach on snow clearing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Other questions? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Freeman.
And you might not have an answer to this. I might ask it of everyone who speaks to this issue today. In terms of looking at equity and recognizing that the tax base is a regressive tax base, and that there's many that are basically asset rich, financially very poor, and they really can't afford the taxes as they reside right now. So from an equity lens, I'm trying to rationalize how I ask those individuals to bear a greater burden on a tax front to achieve this outcome.
I think given that we invested in the LRT, that was a significant tax investment, right? I think we need to live up to that tax investment. Part of living up to that tax investment and part of what we discussed, the reason why I shared the Central Transit Corridor consultation, is we discussed that supporting that tax investment includes making ways for us to get to that tax investment. And so I think we need to find creative ways to do that. We need to reassess where we're getting to funding. That's why Andre presented the national funding strategies. Find ways to access that funding in order to support a more active transportation, because we've already invested in it. So where is that money to support it? I don't know. Does it come from people that may not be able to afford it? I don't think so. I think we need to look elsewhere.
If I may add.
Yeah, go ahead, Andre.
There was a solution also presented from our neighbor, Stephen Herzog, about a levy and looking at it from ward to ward specifically. I know in Uptown, in our Ward 7, there are very few actual residents that are taking care of their sidewalks all the time, so you get sporadic. And so it makes sense to me to look at the developer community. I know there's development charges in question, but I'm just saying that there needs to be some funding models that are not just purely based on municipal tax, that hopefully staff can look into other ways than just the typical standard way.
Thank you, thank you, Andre and Daisy. Councillor Freeman, did you have a follow-up? Okay, over to Councillor Wright.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you very much for this delegation. It's close and dear to my heart, as you know. I just wanted to ask, and I'll probably ask this of each of the delegations, if you think that there's a better way for us to be surfacing ideas and creative solutions from the residents of Waterloo, because this is definitely, a challenging issue. It's not going to go away. I'm just wondering if you have ideas about how we could be best tapping our brain trust in the city.
That's a really good question that I didn't think about.
Well, we have talked about it in the past.
Go ahead, you answer.
So we have talked in the past about, we have two very good universities in town, and we should be tapping into that brain trust. As you mentioned, there's a great school of business at Laurier that can look into. There's also even uptown in the Four Corners that we've got a strong institutions that are geared towards figuring out these types of questions. I can't imagine that we won't be able to find an answer that's appropriate. And I'm not saying to put it onto the backs of those who can't afford it. That is not my solution.
And I also brought up Brian Hill at the beginning because we have Indigenous community members within our community or experts outside of our community that we could be consulting with on these matters. They often are thinking creatively outside the box. How are we utilizing our Indigenous members of the community better for benefit of everyone?
Thank you for those answers. Councillor Wright, did you have a follow-up? No? Councillor Rowe?
Just one more question based on our previous, through you, Mayor. And I understand as a resident as well that we would all like to have our roads cleared as soon as possible. So if we're looking at it citywide and it's not possible to get to every street immediately, what is your window that would be acceptable? Main streets first, that sort of thing, is 12 to 24 hours. I'm just looking for a ballpark of – we need to get to everyone sort of thing.
Thank you. Councillor Wright, did you have a follow-up? No? Okay, over to Councillor Freeman.
Thank you.
Councillor Rowe?
Um, just one more question based on our previous,
through you, Mayor. So again, there was an invitation from Daisy to read through the report that actually goes through and identifies these already figured out pathways. So it's important that we reuse the information and studies that have already been done for this exact answer.
And that's the Central Transit Corridor report, and that's still available online. I just found it through Urban Strategies and Googling through Google, but I'm sure it's available with the region of Waterloo for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of quick questions, and it may actually go through you to Philippa. When you referenced that the federal government, has a permanent active transportation fund of about just shy of 15 billion, and that we should seek funding sources from there. I'm pretty confident that we do. I just wondered if I could ask Philippa Reynolds to comment on that.
Through you, Mayor. For that particular program, I'll have to look into that, but my first thought process is that is likely to be eligible for the region of Waterloo and not the city of Waterloo. But I will also indicate that one of the challenges around grant funding is capital dollars versus operating dollars. Almost always grant funds allow for capital purchases, but not ongoing operating funding, which is what would be needed in order to, do a program like this, which is, the labor associated with delivering this service would be obviously a significant portion of what would be required versus a one-time capital purchase. So certainly can look more into that, but my first reaction is that it's likely a regional eligible piece and likely capital versus operating.
Okay, thank you for that. And my question then is more specifically to the delegates, and again, thank you so much for coming, is I hear what you're saying around the need for making our community accessible and taking advantage of the LRT and ensuring that we're building towards a more equitable and accessible community. A quick note, I just wanted to throw into the conversation that was from our staff was that 5 years ago, we cleared a total of 159 kilometers of sidewalk and trail. We're up to 170 kilometers. We have approximately 600 kilometers of sidewalks across the city. And those kilometers that we cover include community trails, multi-use paths, sidewalks, walkways, bike lanes, pedestrian islands, and school crossings. So not saying there's not more to do, but just to put some of those numbers out there. My question though is, so there's 600 kilometers of sidewalks across, all of our neighborhoods. And I fully acknowledge the neighborhood where I'm fully able-bodied. I live in a single detached house. That's what our neighborhood all looks like. And I like to go out and help shovel for the elderly people, particularly on our street. So partly I do that because I want to be a good neighbor and I want to feel that bit of connection to my neighbors. And I see it as a bit of community building. So again, I take your point and your concern about clearing the sidewalks so that it's more accessible for everyone. My question though is, how do you balance that with people who do want to do this and help their neighbors? And as I said, it feels to me like it's a bit of community building.
Yeah, I that I'm the community advocate.
Yes, you are a big community builder,
I love
absolutely,
that topic.
Daisy.
So I grew up in London, Ontario, and the municipality of London does clear sidewalks throughout the city, which is a much bigger municipality than Waterloo. They do have standards as to when they will clear it, like the timing and everything. But they also do encourage that community building aspect as well. So just as a bit of lived experience piece, when I would often go to school. So I grew up with a new Canadian mother who did not drive. So my lived experience is walking everywhere. That's why it's so much a part of me. Only my father drove, but he was the sole provider at the time. So we walked everywhere. And it was expected that I would walk to the bus stop and head to school. But when I came back, those sidewalks were cleared. Now, the community aspect, those that, on my street growing up, there was actually only one sidewalk. So that made it easy for municipal clearing of sidewalks, easier. But you often found neighbors out there shoveling and helping clear sidewalks when it was needed, according to what wasn't being sufficiently cleared by the city in different moments, right? There's always those different moments, those in-between moments. So there's still opportunity for a hybrid method of community building and the municipality kind of monitoring the health of the sidewalks during the big snow times.
Great, thank you very much. Any other questions, Council? Oh, okay. Councillor Bodley has a question for staff. Unless anyone else has a question for our delegates. Seeing none, thank you very much to you both. We know you're both very avid community builders, and we appreciate what you do. Thank you for your time today. So over to Councillor Bodley for your question.
Thank you, through you, Mayor McCabe. This is the first time that I've heard a delegate actually give me a time frame on when they would, how quickly they would like to have the sidewalks cleared. ASAP was the time frame, which is, I'm sure we would all appreciate that. Out of curiosity, of the 100 and some odd kilometers, and perhaps we don't have an answer here, I hate to put you on the spot, Commissioner Dykstra, but out of the 100 and some odd sidewalks, trails, et cetera, that we do clear, how long does it take for us to clear those sidewalks?
Through the mayor to Councillor Bodley, we can range from, hitting an immediate mark, like as soon as the snow is done, we're out clearing a road, and that's based on proximity of the unit to the shops. So we're hitting those targets, but based on equipment, breakdowns, etc., distance to travel from the shop, it can be, 2 to 3 days to get there.
Thank you. And just a quick follow-up to that. So when we received the report that in previous term of council that highlighted that it would cost us about $3 million, and obviously I understand that those numbers are out of date now, but that it would cost us about $3 million, at what service level? The same type of service level you were talking about, 2 to 3 days in some instances, particularly for what would likely be considered lower priority sidewalks, higher level of service for, higher level of priority sidewalks. What do we, is that something you can maybe comment on in terms of the length of time?
Yeah, and I can, through the mayor to the councillor again, lots of details that we're going to receive, lots of details we want to present to council in future and can take some direction on that. So all that can get fleshed out because there's a balance between cost, equipment needs, as well as, expectation on service, what are the minimum maintenance standards. So there's a number of pieces to it. But in that context, when you received information on the cost of $3 million, it was really around looking at those high priority routes. So our main arterials, links to ensure support, maybe between key health, businesses, key institutions. So that's where we're looking at. So that doesn't include a full city service, but that was a starting point. And that's around the same parameter of, the units dispatched and getting through. I think we'll, as a team, and the staff are here, they're hearing comments from council, and I acknowledge that. And so that's not perhaps the only consideration that we can report back on. There's some options, loading, corners, hybrids, so we're well aware of those, benchmarking against other cities as well. Will all be part of the further discussion as, we receive delegates, talk about the budget on the 13th, and then look to the next budget cycle. So more to come from staff's end, willing to receive these questions, but as we fine tune some options, there'll be some new information that we wish to share with council.
Thank you, Commissioner Dykstra. Any other questions? No? Okay, so we'll move on to our next delegation. Eleanor Grant, who's also a resident of Waterloo. Welcome, Eleanor. Thank you for taking the time to speak to us today. As soon as you're ready, they'll start the timer. Okay. And if you need to adjust the podium, it's adjustable there as well.
All right, is the sound all right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good, okay. Madam Mayor, councillors, and fellow citizens, thank you for putting the issue of sidewalk snow clearing on the agenda. We're years late getting around to talking about this. My neighbors, Daisy and Andre, suggested I come and talk on this today because I've frequently brought it up at neighborhood meetings with candidates. Others can speak more eloquently about the need to plow the sidewalks. For example, there are many blocks in the city that no one seems to be responsible for cleaning, such as construction sites and around plazas. Something needs to be done about these big gaps. They're an impediment to travel. But my beef is mainly with the snowplows. On a snowy morning, the first thing that happens is that the snowplow goes around to open the street for cars, but in doing so, they barricade the world for everyone who's walking. Pedestrians can't cross the street. Your neighbors may all shovel their walks nicely, but it doesn't help much because when you get to the corner, you're barricaded in by an impenetrable bank of packed snow. It isn't anyone's job to open a path for pedestrians. Let that sink in. Suppose you do manage to get from the sidewalk to the street to try to cross, you're then in a greater danger because you can't get to the sidewalk on the other side. It's barricaded by a snowbank too, so you're trapped in the street. Turning cars aren't expecting to see you there. There's a dangerous spot on Pepler Street where I live. When you're walking along the east side of the street and you have to cross Yonge Street in front of the co-op housing, you can't get back onto the sidewalk on the south side of the intersection, so you have to walk in the street. It wasn't quite so bad today. But that's frequently been a bad spot, or you can't get back up onto the street again, and cars are turning the corner at a high speed from Bridgeport Road. I'm always afraid of walking there. A number of pictures of dangerous snowbanks in Waterloo were posted on Twitter yesterday by a man named Aswin Vayaravan. I believe he has spoken to you in the past on this topic. I hope some of you saw the pictures. Particularly bad was a crossing on Northfield Drive, right at the LRT station. Go figure. The snowplow banks disproportionately affect women. Women are more likely to not have a car. We don't have men's large feet and heavy boots and long legs to enable us to kick our way through the banks, and we're more likely to be carrying bags of groceries or pushing a stroller. The snowbanks are a big barrier to daily life, but most of all, it's the sense of abandonment, that nobody knows or cares how difficult they've made daily life to block us out. And hey, I haven't even broached the subject of the disability community. What I'm saying is that the snowplow banks make all of us who walk feel disabled and left out. It doesn't have to be this way. To make the sidewalk corners passable, we really need to remove the snow. If a good neighbor shovels the packed snow to one side, then as soon as there's a thaw, the water runs back to the corner and it becomes a lake of slush. This is also impassable. We need the snow and the snow melt to be able to get away. A couple of months ago, I had a conversation on Twitter with Councillor Vasek. Is Jen here today? I don't believe she is. A conversation about snowbanks blocking corners. I made 3 suggestions. 1, there need to be more storm drains at corners. So when you shovel, you can shake the snow down the drain, and when it melts, the slushy water can run away. I would like to see this put in the budget. with priority given to adding storm drains at particularly dangerous corners that citizens bring to staff's attention, such as the corner of Pepler and Yonge that I mentioned above. The second suggestion I made to Councillor Vasic was that a truck should follow the plough and cart away the snow from corners. Don't let it pile up till March. I understand that most residential streets are done by city ploughs, not the region, so the city could coordinate plough and truck pairs to go out together, thus opening up the city to both cars and people. Imagine that. Imagine going out your door in the morning and finding the street cleared and the corners cleared for walking. Wow, winter would become possible again. If you didn't feel up to shoveling out your car, then you could easily walk to the bus or the LRT. You want to increase ridership? What a different world it would be. Drivers are pedestrians too. Thirdly, while waiting for these steps that would need to be budgeted for, we could make things a little better right now by getting the neighborhood associations involved. The burden of shoveling out the corners shouldn't all fall on the owners of corner lots. Get groups of neighbors to agree to adopt the corner nearest them and make sure it keeps getting shoveled out. This doesn't remove the snow, but at least walking would be somewhat easier for now. And business improvement areas could do the same to help folks get to their stores. To summarize, we really need storm drains at the corners. All four corners of intersections should be our vision. To let the snow run away and reduce flooding on the thaw days and in the spring. While waiting for that, we need a truck to follow every plow and cart away the snow from pedestrian crossing points as soon as the plow deposits it there. While waiting for that to be set up, we need to mobilize neighbors to keep the corners open for now. The point is to realize that it's important if we want to be a civilized and inclusive city. Realize that it's not right to barricade the street corners against people on foot, including those who are small or frail or have mobility devices or children. Realize that it matters. Stop treating us as an afterthought or not thinking of us at all. Once you decide it's important, you'll find that there are lots of solutions, perhaps better ones than those I've suggested here. Just don't delay any longer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eleanor, for those ideas and for taking the time to present to us. Looking to council to see if you have any questions of the delegate. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Wright.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Eleanor, I'm just wondering if you could comment in the same way that when we were chatting with Daisy and Andre about the timing and sort of expectations. I'm just sort of trying to think this through in terms of a service design approach. Like, what are the expectations? What is serviceable sidewalk snow clearing? You've given us a couple of really interesting ideas to work with, and I just kind of want to get a better sense of timing and the level of clearing.
Yeah, I can't comment on the budgetary angle, but I did mention one priority in my talk, which was areas that nobody seems to take responsibility for. Construction sites are a big offender, and there also seem to be a lot of streets that aren't in front of a house, just that cause gaps. The other thing I would suggest is to give priority to streets leading to bus stops and LRT stations. One of the pictures that Mr. Alphabari sent out was right at Parkside and Northfield Drive. Like, I don't see why that wasn't done quickly, where people want to get on and off the LRT. And my side street, Elgin Street, is frequently difficult to get out to the bus stop. And trying to cross King Street. Now, I didn't know whether to mention King Street because it may be done by the region. But when you're trying to cross King Street to get over to the bus stop at Central, there seems to be a really low spot on the road there that's always heaped with snow and slush. So I don't even cross at the crosswalk. I'm going around looking for a place. So things like that, helping people to get to buses, I think is what we have to look at first.
Thank you, Eleanor. Did you have a follow-up, Councillor Wright? No? Okay. Any other questions from council? I just have a question actually through to staff that it's an interesting question you raised, Eleanor. Who is responsible for construction sites and places like that? And do we know what the timelines are for those properties to be cleared?
Through you, Mayor. We would determine the owner of the property, and it's the owner of the property that would be responsible for it. So should we receive a complaint related to a construction site, we would look to ownership, and then the same rules within the bylaw would apply within the 24 hours of the cessation of a snowfall, if indeed that particular portion of sidewalk is the responsibility of the property owner.
So within 24 hours of the cessation of snow. So if it snowed for 2 or 3 days, it's not during the snowfall, and then it's complaint based. Someone needs to call.
We have some proactive enforcement happening. However, the majority of the requests that we receive are complaints based.
Okay. So hopefully, yeah, go ahead, Councillor Wright.
Can I just ask another question to staff? Just as a follow-up on that?
Yeah.
In terms of the Snow Angel program, can you share with us what the demand is like for that program and whether there's any plans for an expansion of it?
I can speak that, Mayor, to the councillor. So high demand for the senior assistance program that we refer to it as, and that's through the brokered service. So high demand for that. We support that through screening those. And that is an area of focus that staff are considering, in our community program and outreach team is part of this conversation, and seeing if there's solutions on that side to support the individual resident property owner in that manner.
Thank you, Commissioner Dykstra. Anything else for the delegate? Seeing no further questions, thank you very much, Eleanor, for making time to come and to present your ideas. You've clearly thought a lot about the issue, and appreciate you taking time to come in today. So the next delegate delegates are Mason Fitzpatrick and Sean McCloskey. If I'm saying that correctly, welcome to you both. Are you sharing the presentation time?
Yes.
Okay.
That's right.
So whenever you're ready, your presentation's loaded. Whenever you're ready, you can raise the podium if that's helpful to you as well.
How do
There we go. Yeah.
Well, council, thank you so much. And I'd like to reassure you all at first, we did not coordinate any of this. This is, we all just happened to be talking about snow clearing at the same time. How do I? Okay, so first, some legislative backdrop. So Section 8.1 of the Municipal Act sets expectations, and along with most parts of the Municipal Act, it allows for the municipality to set the rules for most of the implementation. So the expectation from the Municipal Act is that snow is cleared from sidewalks within 24 to 48 hours, generally. Again, how a city decides to make that happen is up to it. The strategy that the City of Waterloo has opted for is that it is the responsibility of the owner. And the owner in the bylaw, 2009-156, is the registered owner, occupant, tenant of a property or person who, for the time being or permanently, is managing or receiving rent from a property by their own account, or they're an agent or trustee of the person. So, in my case, where I live, that means about 5 different people, and which, you know, there are some problems with that, which I'll get into later. But the portions of sidewalks, I believe Mayor McCabe mentioned it was about a little over 100 meters of sidewalk that we cover. Was that, sorry, 100 kilometers of sidewalk we cover of the 600?
Right now, we clear about 170 kilometers.
170, okay. So that's mostly trails and situations where the owner is the city. Right? So what you end up with is, oh, that's not the right slide. So yeah, this is our, these are the expectations that the city sets for itself, that they require clearance within 48 hours after the end of the snowfall. And they give priority to areas with high pedestrian traffic. So again, that's not priority in terms of the city itself is going to go clear them, because with the system we have, the only levers of power we really get are, you know, additional or decreased enforcement, you know, sending bylaw officers, or proactively, like was mentioned by staff, or afterwards. So, yeah, this is, now you may remember there's a delegation on the 16th where I feel I came in and made this lovely heat map. I reached out to him and he's since added where the city actually, where city crews themselves are shoveling snow on sidewalks. And this is overlaid, of course, with data from the 2021 census of where residents indicated that they are more likely to walk or take transit to work. So looking at this and looking at the black lines and thinking, yeah, you know, they're pretty aligned with pedestrian areas. Those black lines are actually where it is a responsibility of a private owner. So these are where the city crews do not go. And this is where the city crews do go. You know, it's mostly trails, and if you look at that area with where there's more high pedestrian and transit traffic, it's fairly sparse. If we zoom in a little bit and look at that in the uptown area where there's the most pedestrian traffic, you get this with the system that we have, a really sort of patchwork where a city crew is going to go to a spot where the city is the owner, maybe it's a park or a government building, clear the sidewalk, pick up their snow blowers, go down the block to another one, set them down, blow those ones, pick them up, go down to the, and you end up, the patchwork of uncleared to cleared sidewalks around the uptown area is, you know, that's what you get with this. So if council were to, you know, no pun intended, connect the dots here, it would, it seems, you know, I'm obviously, it's something staff could speak to, but it seems like it would be a whole lot more efficient. And then, you know, in the scenario where somebody complains about, you know, a private owner not clearing it, like at a construction site, which Eleanor indicated happens quite a bit, then, you know, first a bylaw officer will come by, issue a warning, and then if they don't do that, then they'll issue a work order, and then a city crew who, you know, has already gotten up and moved a number of times by now, will come back and go to that one and clear it. And it seems like a lot of steps. So unless we give the bylaw officers shovels, I don't know what a better way to enforce that would be. And when at the delegation on the 16th, Councillor Bodley indicated that we should think of children walking to school as well, not just people going to work. And I think that's a really good point. And so I asked Craig to break it down by ages 5 to 19 across the city and where those are spread out. And as you can see, again, these are in this graph, the black lines indicate where private owners are expected to shovel. So again, there's a lot of schools, especially in the western portion of the city, that are surrounded by privately cleared, which, you know, as I guess we should ask staff to confirm, but are generally going to be more likely to not clear than the city crews. Also, the schools themselves, sidewalks adjacent to where public school is, are considered privately, it's responsible of a private owner. So the school on King Street, just near, oh my gosh, what's it called? I'm blanking on what it's called. McGregor? That's one. Yeah, they never clear their sidewalk there. And I don't know if having city crews do school adjacent sidewalks would fix that, but it seems like a pretty obvious one for for kids walking to school, because they're in a bit of danger there. And now Sean is going to talk about what some other cities do.
All right. I almost said good morning. Clearly, I'm on a university time frame here. It's clearly not that time of day. Moving forward, realizing it is now early afternoon. Late afternoon? Who cares? Hi, I'm Sean. What we are going to be discussing is the city of Guelph. I'm glad that got everybody laughing, getting the energy up. We're going to be using the city of Guelph as a case study. I'm sure it's going to be no new news to the councillors here as to their approach to city sidewalk clearing. Also to preface, most of the images that we have here are direct screenshots from either the City of Waterloo website or the City of Guelph website, other than the maps that Mason acquired from his colleague. So specifically speaking to the City of Guelph, they adopt the responsibility of clearing all city sidewalks in their their region. And they have on their website, they say, we clear snow from 701 kilometers of sidewalk, 180 crosswalks, crossings, steps, walkways, and 590 bus stops throughout the city. Sidewalks are prioritized based on pedestrian traffic, volume near high-use facilities such as schools, hospitals, and public buildings. So the City of Guelph adopts the responsibility of clearing all the sidewalks in their region. And that's something that just happens just down the road from us. So that's not something to, obviously, it's a little difficult on such a short notice to put something like this into place, but this is an idea or something to get inspiration moving forward, or something that we can aim for as a city. And the other two items that we're going to be speaking of is something that I came across, and I hope I'm not wrong with this, but when I was looking into the ways that we can report issues in Waterloo region, Guelph has this, if you guys can look at the images that either is on your computer screens or on the walls here, there is a map, and I know it's difficult to see, but every single one of these little images is an icon relating to the types of problems that they have on the side. This is this is giving access to the entire public to look and see where reports of issues have been submitted. And looking at this, when you can actually in real time on the Guelph, if you look up Guelph Report a Problem, you can click on the issue at hand. You can see what type of issue it is. I'm sorry, I'm far away. I can't read this right now. But it also says the date that the complaint was submitted, and then the status of the solution of the complaint by the city. So I think there's one example here of a light not working, and someone submitted that on probably the 27th of January, and it shows the taxpayer or that person on the city website how the status of that issue is coming along. So both of these issues have been completed. This is something that could be easily adopted by the city if we are able to put the resources towards that and get someone to web develop for us. But this is also a very good resource, especially in the issue of snow clearing, where we can keep the city accountable and where we can keep private owners accountable and show our other residents that there are issues that we all see.
Okay, so a couple specific asks. First of all, we had sidewalks adjacent to public schools, to the city's snow clearing routes. Again, this is for kids walking to school. It's harder to track a route from a kid's house to their school, but if we can at least do the ones adjacent to the schools themselves, then seems like a good bang for a buck. There's also, if you think about that map we showed earlier of the area that has the highest foot traffic. If you were just to cover King from Columbia to Erb, and then Albert from Columbia to Erb, that seems to be the best place for expanding the city snow clearing routes, just because where you have that pattern where there's sort of a bunch of sidewalk areas that the city's responsible for, but that are disconnected from each other. We would also like to see the number of complaints is currently public, but the location of where those complaints are is not. So like Councillor Wright mentioned earlier, the
Excuse me, Mason, just to know, so you know you have 1 minute left.
okay, I'll be quick. Yes, make those public. If not for everyone, then for the city maintained sidewalk portions, and then also please amend bylaw 2009-156 to clarify whose responsibility it actually is to clear a sidewalk, whether it's the landlord or the property manager or the tenant or any number of the people involved in the management of property. And then some potential concerns, something Mayor McCabe mentioned earlier, the idea of being neighborly. I think that's real. And, I've experienced this myself. My neighbor calls me and says, hey, I'm going to be out of town. Can you clear my driveway? I think it's an awesome way to build community. And we can preserve that even if the city's doing sidewalks in certain areas, because you can always shovel your neighbor's driveway. If we really want to build an active community, we need access to active transport, like bike lanes, like transit, and we want to include everyone, including the elderly and the disabled. There's also, someone might mention the risk of oversalting. This came up at the budget meeting on January 10th. We still expect people to shovel and salt all the sidewalks. So if we have city crews do that, then we can actually just regulate the amount of salt that gets used instead of leave it up to chance. So thank you, Council, and we'll take any questions.
Thank you very much to you both for this, for your information that you provided. Looking to Council to see if anyone has questions. Yes, Councillor Bodley.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor McCabe. Again, I'm not trying to pick on Guelph. Sorry, I know Ashman's sitting back there, and he called me out on Twitter about Guelph last time. So I'm not picking on Guelph, but you use Guelph as the example here. So in Guelph, they clear, according to your presentation, so I'm going to take your word for it at this stage, that they clear quote unquote high priority sidewalks after 4 centimeters, and all residential sidewalks after 8 centimeters. So my question for you is whether that is good enough from your perspective, because I will point out that in KW, again, I'm taking the word of a random website I Googled while you were talking, and they don't have 4 and 8 centimeters. They have 5 and 10. So I'm going to use these as an example. In Waterloo, we have about 9 days a year where we get 5 centimeters of snow, and we have about 2.5 days a year where we get 10 centimeters of snow. So in terms of clearing all sidewalks, like Guelph does, at 8 centimeters of snow, that's, according to this, I'm playing with numbers here, maybe 3 days a year. Is that good enough for you, or is that not good enough for you?
So even if we just start with areas that, sorry, you mentioned that, I think our current expectation in the bylaw is after 4 centimeters of snow, it has to be cleared within 24 hours. Is that correct? Do you know that?
My understanding of our current bylaw is that it needs to be down on your residential street, needs to be down to the pavement after 24 hours.
Okay. If we can just keep those expectations, and I don't see any problem with that. Even if we just do the high traffic areas, that should suffice.
So just clarifying that that's not what Guelph does.
Yeah.
I think it's just the premise. I think just accepting the responsibility of even, the rarity of those occasions may be on the lesser side, but taking the responsibility to ensure that everybody is getting the same. Obviously, every township or municipality or region has to adopt a priority. You have to start somewhere. So that makes sense. But just having the city adopt the responsibility of being able to do that and allocating the funds, I think that speaks volumes.
But just to pick up on your point, Councillor Bodley, but assuming Guelph gets the same amount of snowfall approximately as Waterloo Region, based on those numbers, would Guelph ever do that? Would they ever use the city facilities to clear their sidewalks? I'm just kind of confused with the numbers.
Do they have different? What is our centimeter count for responsibility on our residents? Does anyone know that? It should be in the bylaw somewhere.
No, but you're saying that in Guelph, after 8 centimeters, they clear all the high prioritized sidewalks. But I was just saying, if there was, what did you say? How many days a week, or 2.5 days that reach that threshold? Is that the amount of snow clearing that the city of Guelph does? 2.5 days of the winter, based on those numbers for all sidewalks?
It would appear so.
Okay. And the same with London. Okay. Just wanted to clarify that. Sorry, did you have a question, Councillor Freeman?
Well, just in that same vein, London only clears after 5 centimeters and 10 centimeters. So Guelph at 8 is, it's just like when I look at London, for example, they only clear roads and bike lanes if there's less than 5 centimeters of snow. And so I don't know, I guess I asked the question, like if we were to meet with the classifications of these other cities, I'm not sure that improves accessibility per se for someone in a wheelchair. And I think it comes down to, I'm trying to noodle through this and understand what are people's real priority here. We're already looking at increasing our snow removal on priority networks. So if I looked at Columbia Road, for example, which is street-faced, curb-faced sidewalk, and the plow basically fills it in, and it's incredibly difficult for a homeowner to clear a plow row. I can see making investments in terms of dealing with those priority pedestrian networks, but suggesting that these other municipalities clear all of the sidewalks within their city, they actually don't. A class 2 road where there's houses, they'll only clear if there's more than 10 centimeters of snow.
So yeah, it was the public complaints that we were really interested in Guelph. But thanks for clarifying that.
The system there. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Did you have anything further, Councillor Freeman, on that?
Well,
Or-
it's just London's the same.
Right, yeah.
So London was mentioned too, and London will only clear at 5 centimeters, and then after 8 centimeters. And so again, those sidewalks would essentially sit with snow all the time if a homeowner didn't choose to take responsibility for them.
Right. So if I could just summarize, I think you're saying, the delegates are saying that the system that Guelph is using for reporting bylaw or other issues is maybe what you want us to focus on, and we're pointing out that, and no disrespect to our neighbors in London or Guelph or Elmira or other places that clear their sidewalks, but particularly the two that you're referencing there, sidewalks actually wouldn't get cleared very often or very frequently.
Yes,
I
and
think is the
respectfully
point,
as well
yeah.
to our neighbors as well. I'm not necessarily saying we need to adopt exactly what Guelph is doing.
Yeah.
I just thought for the comparison, since we also listed what our expectations were of ourselves, I just thought it would be adequate to look at the two of them together and
Sure.
just to compare ourselves locally. But yeah, for the most part, it's the transparency of the ways that we can complain or make a request for action, and the way that we could adopt a system like that for accountability on the city's part, and then transparency as well to the taxpayer.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. And I just wanted just a quick note, when I said there was 170 kilometers of sidewalks and trails in Waterloo, that's there's nearly 41 kilometers are community trails, 24 kilometers are multi-use trails or paths, 85 kilometers are sidewalks. Walkways, road to road lengths are 14.5 kilometers, and then bike lanes are approximately 5 kilometers. And then there's pedestrian islands and school crossings. So the majority, nearly, I guess half of what is cleared are sidewalks of the current 170 kilometers that we clear. So just wanted to make sure that's clear for people as well. And there will be more, there will be more information coming back in a more fulsome report. So you don't have to respond to that. I just wanted to clarify that. Sorry, does council have any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much, both of you, for, did you have something else you wanted to?
You made me think of something, if I have a second. There are some points, if you look at we have a publicly available map on the City of Waterloo's website of what we currently cover. And there's some situations where, as you said, we mostly focus on trails, or about half.
Sidewalks, we clear 85, of the 170 kilometers we clear,
it's 80,
half of it is sidewalks.
Okay. And a lot of them are trails. And sometimes you'll get a situation where a bike lane will be cleared where the sidewalk isn't. And so people will, if that sidewalk isn't cleared, they'll end up walking on the bike lane instead, and then put themselves in risk of being hit by a bike or something. And I think that we should clear both. If there's a situation where we're clearing bike lanes and not the sidewalk beside it, we should do both.
Okay, and that looks like it's prompted a question or a comment from Councillor Wright.
Just a follow-up comment on that. So Montreal's often held up as the gold standard of snow clearing in North America. And they clear 10,000 kilometers of sidewalks. A lot of that is supported by the 50,000 cars that get towed. So it's basically being underwritten by car towing. So when we're talking about the scale of snow removal, like we're talking about dumping tons of snow and the associated salt into the St. Lawrence River because there's nowhere to store it. Like that scale of snow removal is just, it's mind-boggling. So I just want to put that on the table so that we're all thinking in the service standards and like what our expectations are. You know, we've talked a lot about prioritization of routes, but it's really about what is good enough and how we achieve a certain level of scale that we're happy with.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Council.
Okay, thank you both, Mason and Sean. We appreciate the presentation and the information and just your interest in this topic. So our next and final delegation on this is Janice Jim, who's also a resident of Waterloo. Welcome, Janice. Thank you for making time to come in today to talk to us. And if you need to lower the podium, you feel free to. And you have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mayor McCabe, councilors. I'm here on behalf of another resident, Teresa, since she's unable to attend in person. I'm going to read her statement in entirety. Mayor and members of council, today I'm here to discuss the need for citywide sidewalk snow clearing from a disability perspective. In-person only meetings are unfortunately inaccessible to my family at this time. So an especially big thank you to Janice for offering to present on my behalf. I'm a solo parent to a disabled, medically complex, and immunocompromised youth who is a wheelchair user. We do not have a vehicle and as such rely on active transportation and transit to get around. While many issues affect my family, the lack of sidewalk snow clearing underpins it all. The lack of access from uncleared sidewalks has affected my employment, childcare, housing, medical care and therapies, educational opportunities, exercise and leisure, socialization, etc. Every single area of our life has been negatively affected and has deeply impacted our health and well-being. And unfortunately, my experience has repeatedly shown that the bylaw approach does not result in consistent snow clearing or accessible sidewalks here in Waterloo. We need change and we need it yesterday. I'm asking you to ensure that we are budgeting for improvements, that you prioritize accessibility here in Waterloo. I'm wondering if you would consider, what if I told you that every time it snowed, you couldn't go to work for a week or two, no school for you or your kids, no medical appointments, buses, trips to the pharmacy or grocery store, no socializing outside your household, and that if you attempted to do any of these things out of desperation, that you'll injure yourself, put yourself in very real danger, and most often end up being out of commission for longer as a result. How would your employer respond, your dean or principal? How would your physical and mental health hold up? What if you missed a medical specialist appointment that you've been waiting years to see, and they charge $200 for late cancellations and no-shows, but you have no funds to pay that? What if you need medications or food? This is the reality for my family every single winter. This is the reality for many disabled folks in our community, and it's not acceptable. If these were your realities, I'm certain you won't accept just be patient repeatedly as an acceptable solution. You would ensure change happened immediately. So I'm asking you to act as if it is you. This weekend, I spoke with a wheelchair user who is going to university here in Waterloo, but they're seriously considering dropping out because of the inaccessibility from uncleared sidewalks and transit stops. They injured themselves this weekend by needing to make a trip to the pharmacy. I also chatted with another wheelchair user who's been wheeling themselves on the road for the past 5 days in order to get to and from work, which is obviously incredibly risky, and another who is blind but hasn't been able to risk going out since last Wednesday, as they need to cross a major intersection to get anywhere from their house. And that's too big of a risk without the guaranteed of cleared sidewalks where the tactile markers they rely on to safely navigate aren't clear or accessible. My family hasn't gone more than 2 blocks from our house in that same time for the same reasons. The city's current approach to sidewalk clearing is classist and ableist, and not in line with the diversity, equity, and inclusion principles that this city and council proclaims to be at its core. In Waterloo's own transportation master plan sidewalk policy, it states, the City of Waterloo recognizes pedestrian sidewalk infrastructure as an essential component of the city's transportation network. Sidewalks provide areas for safe pedestrian movement and access. They enhance connectivity, promote walking, offer an alternative to automobiles, and where installed are designed to address regulatory obligations posed under the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. Where sidewalks and multi-use paths are planned installed, developers and organizations are obligated to follow these standards in order to identify, remove, and prevent barriers so that persons with disabilities can access and participate in activities within the community. The city has identified the need to maintain sidewalk standards under the AODA and its own transportation master plan, yet it's not being done. This upcoming budget does not put forward any improvements, and unfortunately, the status quo isn't good enough. We need to make immediate investments and changes to the current system. Even if city-wide clearing is not going to be discussed right now, there are many things that can be improved in the meantime with some policy change, priority shifts, and funding. This week has been the perfect example of how the current practices and protocols do not work. Currently, bylaw complaints will not be investigated until 24 hours after snow has stopped. But it has snowed every single day for the past 5 days, which means we're on day 6 of having zero recourse because nothing will even be investigated yet. But let's say I do report. These are rarely investigated in less than 48 hours, which means we're now at least 3 days after the end of a snowfall. So over a week after the snow started this past week, and that's only for warning or educational material at best. It then often takes another week or more to follow up on that warning and more to have it cleared. But if it has snowed again in the meantime, which more often than not it has, then the process is restarted. I have gone weeks without intervention despite reporting, following up multiple times with the city and my council, etc., when we quite literally could not get off our street. Most of the time, nothing is done when I report and the sidewalks remain uncleared and inaccessible. And then there's the fact that reporting disproportionately affects the very people who aren't able to navigate the sidewalks. Those who are disabled and seniors with limited mobility who can't clear their sidewalks themselves and often aren't able to hire someone to do it as they're surviving on fixed incomes such as ODSP of just $1,200 a month or less. On top of that, I have many neighbors who support my family in various ways. By reporting them, do I risk upsetting them and losing the support they provide? This is unconscionable. But the multi-dwelling units are the biggest offenders in my neighborhood. The landlords never clear the sidewalks, and there are zero deterrents or practices from the city for ensuring these chronic offenders' sidewalks are clear. And we have no system in place to have these properties addressed proactively throughout the season. And even when these uncleared spots are cleared by the city and charged, they don't see the bill until tax season, which again removes the incentive to have it addressed immediately. Additionally, while uncleared sidewalks and windrows are the base access issues, the barriers go beyond just the sidewalks themselves. Reporting is also inaccessible. Phone reporting is only available Monday to Friday from 8:30 to 4:30. In order to report, you need an address. In order to have an address, you need to be able to see, have the capacity to find and remember addresses, the ability to speak and hear, read and write to report, etc., etc. My daughter's disabilities extend into multiple of these categories. She would quite literally have no way to report uncleared spots if not accompanied by someone else. The online reporting system is also incredibly cumbersome, non-intuitive, and time-consuming. The various steps, screens, checkboxes would make it near impossible for anyone who's blind or low vision and using a screen reader to navigate it. And with the current reporting system, each individual house needs to be reported, but there is no efficient way to report multiple houses online. This is particularly frustrating because unless the entire block's sidewalk and wind road is fully cleared, it is not accessible. The city offers snow clearing support for seniors, but it has extremely tight restrictions and very limited spaces, so they fill up very quickly. Too many are left out or unable to utilize this due to the restrictions. When I have met with various city staff over the past few years with regard to this issue, I have been told everything from be patient and we know it's not okay, but it's just what it is. Or we can't improve the reporting system because then we won't be able to keep up with the complaints. I have been told changes will be made, only for nothing to happen. So I asked again, if this was your life and there was no one else to pay your bills or meet your family's needs, what would your priorities shift? I saw on the city's Twitter account the other day, spotted young schoolmates working together to help clear snow for neighbors in need. What a lovely act of kindness. A mini grant from the city was used to purchase more shovels. While this might warm the hearts of some, it frustrates me. Why is accessibility dependent on grants and acts of kindness? What if we shifted our thinking towards access as a necessity, whereby we consider what other programs we could reallocate funds from that don't affect the human rights of community members who could perhaps access grants and acts of kindness to continue their service instead? Today, I am asking you to ensure AODA standards are being met to ensure disabled...
Janice, just so you know, there's 1 minute
Yes,
left.
the last paragraph. Today, I'm asking you to ensure AODA standards are being met to ensure disabled citizens can fully access and participate in our community year-round. My daughter is the most delightful human I've ever known. This city is truly missing out by denying her access for half the year. We are valuable members of this community, and we need and deserve to have full access to the city, and so does every disabled resident of and visitor to Waterloo. Please ensure that we do. Thank you, Teresa McQuillan.
Thank you very much, Janice, for delivering that on behalf of Teresa. And through you to Teresa, if she is able to watch.
Yes, she is watching online.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that thoughtful and fulsome presentation. So over to council. Any questions of Janice?
Teresa is available on text if anyone wants it, and then she could also follow up via phone or email later on.
Okay, thank you very much.
She just had an update that the assistant program only had 70 spots and they filled up really quickly, and so she couldn't access it. And then her time frame would be 24 hours for sidewalks to be clear.
Okay. Okay, so responding to some
That's
of the other people's
live
questions.
That's a live
update. Thank you, Teresa, for following along so closely. That's great. I know we've already asked the other delegations a lot of questions, so, Councillor Rowe has a question.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you so much for sharing that from Teresa. My question is, I just wanted to clarify if the inability to use sidewalks is the entire winter, or is it concentrated around the storm events and waiting for clearing to take place?
I think it's the storm events, and you saw pictures from the other delegations that the bus stops, the corners, there's no way for a wheelchair to go over those. And even like bag buttons at crossings, sometimes the plow goes by and builds up amount and no one is in charge of clearing that, and so that makes like residents unable to travel in their wheelchairs.
Thank you.
Just a point, and maybe Commissioner Dykstra, you might want to or add to this, but I think it does get a bit more complicated in our city when I'm just thinking of the point about LRT and the bus stops, because those are regional stops, and obviously. As a transit user myself, it is important for those to be cleared, but those are the region's responsibility, not the city. So this is, just a reminder that we are in a two-tier municipal structure that just adds another layer of complexity to this. So I don't know, Mark, if you had anything more to add to that. I don't want to sound, I know I risk sounding like we're finger pointing, but there are some divisions of a labor that we do need to consider as well. So whether you want to respond or Councillor or Commissioner Dykstra wanted to respond.
I'll just note to you, Mayor, that is correct, your
okay,
statement
thanks.
there.
I would like it when people tell me I'm correct, so that's... No, I don't know if you had any comment to that, Janice.
No, I mean, it's definitely something we need to be working on, just make sure people can access transit and like travel, crossing a road.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and all the delegations have spent a lot of time here today preparing to come here today, and we really appreciate it. But it may be worth, also, and I am a regional councillor, it may be worth also raising some of those points with the regional government as well, just particularly around LRT, access to bus stops, clearing at bus stops as well. Sorry, any other comments or questions here? Seeing none, thank you very much, Janice, and through you to Teresa. Thank you for that. And I don't know, Councillor Dykstra, if I'll turn to you right now, just for, we've just had four delegations, plus 2 or 3, I forget, a couple of weeks ago. So just wondered if you wanted to comment, provide some summary comments.
Yep, for sure. Thank you, Mayor, for the opportunity to do so and provide council with some comments. Appreciate the delegations all coming forward this week and weeks past to, our discussion paper has been presented to council as part of this budget and has enabled the discussion, and we as staff really value that too, because it gives us a sense of answers to some of the questions we're hearing back. What's the level of service? What's the expectation? What are some of the challenges, the questions council's probing and asking about? Hearing those responses are very beneficial to staff. Staff are in the audience who are key to this operation, so they're in tune with what's going on and as we move forward. And we do have an opportunity to report back. And just for a reminder for council, in the budget package for this year is a discussion paper. Gives you feedback on what we've done in the past couple of years through the modernization study, speaks to what's been accomplished there. And it does speak to areas where we need improvement. We do know that, and that's part of the discussion. We want to understand what's the best route forward here to do that. But I do note in that paper, it's a future consideration, but there are 2 key budget piece items on the operating side that speak to some true-ups related to fleet and to SALT. And that speaks to ongoing work that's needed in that area. But there's an opportunity when those items come forward on February 13th for council to provide direction specific to reporting back more on this to inform the next 3-year budget. And that can be sooner than this time, mid-year. In May, June, we can report back to help council have the inputs from staff to make a decision to help guide us. So noting that as an opportunity to assist council in the steps forward. So noting that for council's consideration on the 13th as we discuss those key operating budget items.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And again, thank you to the people who've taken time to delegate either today or previously, and certainly encourage you
to talk to the region as well, to raise it there. But also, just to remind people that just last week, staff brought forward recommendations regarding improvements to customer service strategy that council will consider, as well as the digital service strategy. So, we don't need to think of these things in silos. We can, there's a number of issues for council to consider kind of as a whole. So thank you again. Any additional questions regarding the report that Philippa and her Brad and Tony have presented here? Seeing none, I'll look for a mover and a seconder to receive this report. Councillor Rowe, and moved by Councillor Hamner.
Sorry, I don't think I took the time to really thank staff for summarizing everything that happened at that meeting. I just feel like as finance chair, I'd like to do that because
Good point.
I was traveling at the time, and I appreciate, Mayor, that you came to the beginning of the meeting and just kind of said that as a council, we're looking forward to listening and just more broadly, so the citizens know why council doesn't attend that meeting, is really because we want to facilitate a conversation between staff that are working on the budget and the citizens, and let them do a deeper dive. And also sometimes when council attends, we become the focus of the comment, as opposed to the comments being directed at the budget itself. But I really appreciated the summary that staff did of that meeting. It helped me a lot to know kind of what happened there. I felt that it was a good overview. And so I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Yeah, good point. Thank you very much. Any other comments? Okay, so we have a mover, a seconder, and all in favor of receiving them. That is unanimous. Thank you, Philippa, Brad, and Tony. So before we move to our final agenda item, the strategic plan council workshop number 1, I just wondered if people need like a 5-minute break. Okay, we'll just take a 5-minute break and then return, and that will give Sandy, Sarah, and I apologize, I forget the other person's name, a chance to set up. So we'll resume in 5 minutes.
here. This is
Ask you a
Herbsville.
question.
Oh, yeah.
We're trying, or both of you. Did you download?
All right, we'll get a 20-second warning here to return our attention to. So thank you for your indulgence. Okay, so the next item, our last item in terms of our report is the 2023-2026 strategic plan, our first workshop. We'll turn it over again to Sarah Lewis from Deloitte to lead us through this next presentation. Welcome again.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We are here now to have a discussion about hot off the campaign trail. So this is a very important conversation for us as we work on the early work of the strategic plan to get your perspectives on what you've heard. Before we get started, though, I just wanted to introduce my colleague Tassine Rana, who is a senior associate with the Deloitte, and he is a very core part of the team that's working on the strategic plan, and he's taking notes tonight. I'm sure that he'll be more engaged in presentations as we move forward, but he may also have comment or questions as we go forward. All right, so let's get started. So this is an opportunity for members of council to share three main themes that you've heard from constituents while on the campaign trail. So comments are limited to 5 minutes for each member of council, just to ensure everyone has a chance to speak. Sandy will be keeping track of time, and we'll just give an indication when there's about 30 seconds left. So again, this is these comments and your perspectives from the conversations that you have with residents from the areas that you represent of the city are very important as we look towards the development of the strategic plan. And so we really look forward to your comments. In terms of order, we were hoping to start with Councillor Wright from Ward 7 and then move through the different wards to end with Mayor McCabe. Councillor Basic is not here this evening, but she has sent her comments, so I just want everyone to be aware that we have received those comments.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So we're ready to jump right in with Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you so much. And through you, Mayor, I probably won't take the whole 5 minutes here. I just want to, first of all, acknowledge that knocking on doors throughout Ward 7 was a fantastic education, and I'm deeply appreciative of that opportunity and the time residents gave me and my campaign team. Residents shared their concerns in thoughtful ways and opened my eyes to perspectives that I would not have encountered otherwise. The main thread that weaves through everything that I heard is concern about quality of life, whether it's eroding, and whether we're making the right investments as a city. So in some cases, it was concerns about development and the appropriateness and quality of buildings. Some of these concerns were climate action related. Others were rooted in seeing a neighborhood streetscape change really quickly and the feeling that there was a lack of vision and communication about what was being built. I think change is unsettling, and when you don't recognize your neighborhood anymore, it becomes a big concern. A lot of concern was expressed about access to affordable housing and a perceived mismatch in the supply. Especially the 1 and 2 bedroom condos, and I know we hear that over and over again. I heard it all the time while I was knocking on doors. Everyone wanted to know how we are going to address that. Density, is desired, but how we achieve that matters, and that was definitely something that came through. People really wanting, again, that missing middle, something other than tall and sprawl. One of the other things that I heard about was transportation related. So the way people move around the city is changing, and that's raising concerns. And there was some polarization in that conversation. Either we needed bolder action to support multimodal transportation and climate action, or how we were doing it was ill-conceived. So it was really on the two sides, especially when it comes to arterial roads, which may not entirely be the city's responsibility, but in terms of coordination, it certainly is. Overwhelmingly, residents love the multi-use trails. That was just, people are happy with multi-use trails. Arterial roads were perceived as necessary, but lacking safe, age-friendly crossings, or still dangerous with the added bike lanes or pedestrian islands. Some residents find their neighborhoods are cut off from important assets like schools, parks, and recreation facilities. And in that context, what you have access to without intersecting one of these arterial roads becomes really important. The last thing that came through, and this might not be specifically about a municipal service, but it's about the election itself. When you knock on doors, you chat with a lot of older residents. They're vocal, politically engaged, invested in the democratic process. They overwhelmingly express concern about the election, the lack of information about candidates and local media, the lack of print materials and debates before the early voting polls opened, and they expressed a concern that they were being left behind. And I just want to note that none of this pertains to how the city actually ran the election. It's more about our shared responsibilities and obligation to democratic engagement as a community. And it points to the overall fatigue coming out of 2 years of pandemic lockdowns and the related social isolation. So ultimately, with so many new names on the ballots, there was considerable decision-making fatigue. And what I take away from this is just that as a community, we need to really invest in meaningful engagement with residents. Beyond surveys and online engagement tools, as a council, we have to be present in our wards and really listen. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. So we'll go in descending order then. So Councillor Rowe, Ward 6.
Thank you, Mayor. Just off the top, I wanted to reiterate what Julie was saying about the feeling of lack of engagement with the election and not understanding. Personally, my family and I made a chart of all of the candidates in Ward 6 and had it, the nursing home on Herb Street, they posted it so that the candidates knew, because if they didn't get the paper, they weren't on social media. So that's just an example. I just wanted to say that for me, Ward 6 is quite varied. And so this was a really interesting experience to learn of the issues that mattered to people based on where they lived in the ward. I'm in Maple Hills, I cover Beechwood, the University of Waterloo, Columbia, the high-rises, Sugarbush. So the issues were very similar, but the experiences were very different. So the top of mind across Ward 6 was affordable housing and homelessness. And the affordable housing piece was very different for everyone. In the single house residential areas, there was concern for their future, for children and grandchildren. Adult children were living at home. How were they going to afford a place to live and have their own families? Whereas when you get into the student areas, there was a considerable difficulty for some students to get housing. So there was unhoused students searching. It was quite a problem in that regard. And also for seniors that want to downsize, but they don't know where they're going to go and what they can afford. So it was very similar issues, but very different perspectives. I also just wanted to mention that in the Sugarbush area, the Barringer, Hazel, Albert student area, that there was the homeowners that are there and also the renters are concerned about the area becoming taken over by developments, and where are they going to go? So there's that social piece that was very present. And so I think really there was sort of a sense of paralysis and stress, like that people don't feel they have options. In terms of homelessness, I found in my ward that there was considerable concern and compassion for the unhoused, and that there was a general sense of desire for support, but again, feeling helpless and don't know what to do, but something needs to be done. The second prominent issue is traffic calming, pedestrian safety, and connected systems. So that was right across the wards. Desire for traffic calming measures, speed bumps, yields, stop signs, road adjustments, something to stop the cars from speeding. Particularly University Avenue, the students at U of W, when I was there, were vocal about feeling unsafe on the major arterial roads. So, sorry, is that right? Yes. And connected systems, connected trails, connected bike lanes, and connections with the GRT, LRT, all modes of transportation. People were, commenting about that. I wanted to start this by saying that the climate change was obvious to everyone. So yes, we know climate change and the city's working on that. So here are the other issues. So the climate change was always there. I kind of couched everything here underneath sort of community connection support and feeling like there's customer service excellence from the city, which was winter maintenance of sidewalks and trails so that seniors could participate in the community and feeling that they are seen and important. The leaf collection for me was huge this election. I live in a mature canopy area, Beechwood. It's right across to Sugarbush. So this was interesting because, again, it had many facets to it. People are looking for leaf collection, not specifically because it's handy, but in terms of ability to clean up and bag their own leaves, just that extra bit of work impacted some people, what it may cost other people to pick up and have them taken care of for them. And also in terms of supporting climate initiatives and encouraging the green city that we, are looking at, more trees, et cetera, to support climate. So there were many different reasons for that, but that was quite prevalent as well. So that kind of summarizes the majority of comments from Ward 6.
Great, thank you, Councillor Rowe. I should have asked previously if you had any clarification questions or anything.
No, not right now.
Okay,
Perfect.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
So Councillor Vasic is Ward 5, and she's not able to be here today. So but I know you have this, but I'm just going to take a minute. We don't normally do this, but just because this is for strategic planning and given the importance of it, I am going to read it into the record. So she did say that she's very sad to miss this day because strategic planning is one of her favorite parts of council. So there's 3 listed here: traffic calming, safety, and ease of mobility. That's the first one. This theme remains consistent from the first election
the majority of her requests from last term of council and what she heard during this past election. This includes winter accessibility concerns. So the next one is housing and homelessness. This was not a prominent election issue raised at the door by residents in 2018, but was this time, with a general sense that we need to act quickly on this, and also a sense of helplessness that as a collective, we don't know what to do. Interspersed with these conversations, though not the majority, were NIMBY and pull up their bootstrap attitudes that will need to be addressed. So the third one is the COVID recovery. These themes here were supporting small business and a general lack of connectedness and happiness, feelings of heaviness and disorientation about how to move forward. Among other things, I see opportunities here for enhanced arts and culture, i.e. Lumen having such a giant turnout in the fall may be an indication that people are seeking these opportunities to see beautiful things, interact with them, and be around other people, similar to what Waterloo was on the weekend. So those are Councillor Vasek's comments. Thank you for letting me read those into the record. And so we will go to Councillor Freeman in Ward 4.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. So the number one issue in my ward that came up primarily because of the communications that happened towards the beginning of the real election drop was around traffic and traffic speeds. That was in Ward 4, that was something that people had a lot to say about, and they made it clear to me that they weren't supportive of 30 kilometer per hour in Ward 4, that they were looking for 40 kilometers per hour, and that they appreciated a lowering of speeds, but that they didn't want to go as low as 30. So that came through both by email and when I was out walking. The rest of the issues that I'm going to mention are kind of things that came in through emails and questionnaires and people following up with me, because I felt that when I was out talking to people, most people were generally happy. They just, these were kinds of things that if it was a priority to someone, they would email me. So more broadly, they kind of fit into a couple of groups. So one being climate change, and in terms of continuing to move forward on those important efforts. And the other would have been around diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm going to put it in DEI, even though it covers a few things. So for example, one of the things I'd like to see us give more consideration to is how we recognize individuals in the city on our intake forms, applications, programs, everything, so that we move away from an identification that may be gender-based, so mother, father, wife, spouse, those kinds of things. And it would be nice to see those changes made. Still under DEI, there was questions about building a reconciliation contribution fund and whether or not there's opportunities for something like that to be created where taxpayers could add on their tax bill to it if they wanted to. And then more broadly around housing. So housing and homelessness, the role of the city within that. People ask me about our housing bylaw and whether they kind of wanted some disclosure through a registry around, even single family homes that were actually owned by corporations, so they're not actually people, so that individuals who were renting properties that were governed by our housing bylaw had more information about the owner of that building. There was questions around public access to washrooms 24/7. So I kind of put those things together under equity and inclusion, because as the city gentrifies, and like Councillor Rowe mentioned about some houses where they've kind of been stable rental neighborhoods and or single residential neighborhoods, how some of those properties are being purchased and then converted, and that people who are living there don't know where their next step will be. And I, these are challenging conversations, and how we address them within our strategic plan. I don't necessarily know the answer. Truthfully, I didn't have, and it could have been time of year, I didn't actually have people talk to me about snow clearing other than to say they don't want to pay to have it done across the whole city. And that they feel as though there needs to be a partnership with homeowners as it relates to snow clearing, such that, you know, the city clears some and the residents clear others. So that was kind of all I heard on that one. So it wasn't quite as strong as what we've heard today. But I think those were really key themes. And honestly, if the encampments that reside in Ward 4 were kind of as prominent during the election as they became after the election, I suspect that those would have been, they would have come up when I was talking with people, but they didn't. But I do think we're addressing that nonetheless, because we had the report on encampments at our last council meeting. So I think those are the things I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Freeman. We will go to Ward 3, Councillor Roach.
Yeah, so hot off the campaign trail. So I represent Ward 3, which is the Lakeshore Conservation Meadows area, and it's really interesting. My ward, it's amazing, I think. I mean, it's a really diverse ward, you know, from Behringer to Benjamin, from Lake Louise to North Lake, or the treetops to Sunnydale. It is a very, very diverse community. Going door to door, and this is a first time experience for me, I thought I got really the idea that there was a lot of election fatigue, that, I'll be honest here, a lot of people didn't even know there was an election coming up. And you know what? Even if there was an election, so what? My vote doesn't matter. The city council doesn't listen to me. You know, they put out a survey on speed, and by far the majority didn't want it to go to down, and then we were ignored. Or I've got a few people, not a few, more than a few, message me on backyard fires. They want backyard fires, but of course we won't have backyard fires. So as I said, depending on where I was in the ward, I mean, we have a lot of new Canadians, and we have some very, from one end, some very, very affluent people as well. And but it was really interesting to hear, when I'm in a certain community about voting, I actually had people come to me and say, well, they didn't, like in one area, my, in the Sunnydale area, a lot of people didn't vote, even though I spent a lot of time there. I'm at the food bank, House of Friendship. I have had people, I think you may have been there, Mayor, where they said, well, are the police going to be there, at the voting station? They just didn't, they weren't comfortable in voting. And, it showed, I think 23% of the people in my ward actually voted. Not many people knew about the election, but there was one gentleman, Pastor McCabe. I'm sorry, McCabe, Pastor Levesque. I was just thinking because he talked to you and I were talking, but he actually put together a little, I wouldn't call it a debate, but an information session. So my opponent and I got to speak to the folks there. One thing that wasn't on the list, I'll be honest here, this whole climate change and green initiatives, that was not a big deal in my ward at all. But affordable housing was, rent is unaffordable, even if they can find a place to rent. Different areas of my ward, I guess former councillors that know my ward, they're the traffic concerns and conservation meadows with the roundabouts, they may not have been too keen on. And leaf collection, people did want leaf collection, continued leaf collection in my area. It's funny that we had, the meeting today on the delegates on snow clearing. Actually, that was an issue. In my ward, if you know, I have Glen Forest Boulevard runs. It's a major artery through Lakeshore South. And I must have had 10 people talk to me about snow clearing there. It's a boulevard, if you can visualize it, or if you've seen that area, where they say the plows go up one way and then they come down the other way, but there's a boulevard in the middle. But so the plows tend to have their plow into the driveways, going on each way, not into the boulevard itself, right? but onto the drive. And I don't know, maybe they had a community meeting before I did my walkabout, but it's funny that about 6 or 7 people mentioned that to me. Overall, it's been a great experience campaigning. It was a lot of fun. Great to meet my neighbors. You know, I've lived in the community in that ward for like over 40 years. So I got to really see a lot of people that you just kind of wave to once in a while. But it's really nice to have a chit chat and talk with them. So that was my area.
Thank you, Councillor Roach. And now we will move to Ward 2, Councillor Bodley.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor McCabe. Sticking to my themes is going to be tough, but I'm going to keep it to 5 minutes, I promise, Sandy. Before I dive deeper into themes, I just wanted to acknowledge a few more granular concerns I was struggling to put into themes that I heard with some frequency, that the city needs to step up its game when it comes to park maintenance and boulevard maintenance, questions about bylaw and enforcement response times. I did get questions about snow clearing. And then particularly in the west end of the city, recreation opportunities in the west end. I know we're making progress on that with things like the new spray pad, the proposals for a hub park in Clare Hills, the skate park, but just general concern about the fact that all of the seemingly large community assets, Rim Park, WMRC, Moses Springer, Alban Corrick, they're all way over there and nothing on this end of town. And then before I dive into my main themes, I also wanted to make a little bit of space for the fact that I received a lot of comments from residents about healthcare. You know, Royce, I'd like to care more about Parks and Rec, affordable housing, climate change. It's just really hard to do that when I have a sick relative that cannot access the healthcare they need, when I don't have a family physician, when I'm on a wait list for months for surgery. And I know that these issues are some of these are well beyond the scope of the local area municipality, but in this campaign particularly, I heard how these healthcare concerns are barriers to engaging in the community. And so I'm going on to the themes, and I'm going to cheat here again because I have 4, but my first theme is around safe streets. The overwhelming majority of concerns expressed to me were related to how to make our streets safer for pedestrians, cyclists, seniors, and youth. And usually you could put these into one of 3 buckets. So one would be slow down the cars. So a greater emphasis on traffic calming in areas around schools and parks, more speed bumps, more traffic calming posts, more photo radar, etc. 2 would be make it easier to walk. So create more raised crosswalks and or other traffic calming in areas where there are trail connections crossing streets, especially again near schools and parks. More PXOs to cross busy streets like Columbia, a significant review of roundabout design to make them more pedestrian and cycling friendly, create priority sidewalk snow clearing routes as we heard today so kids can walk to school and residents can access transit. And the third bucket would be around making it easier to cycle, so filling in the gaps in our cycling network so that it is safe to get anywhere in the city by bike without having to meticulously plan your route. The second one that I heard a lot about, sorry Hans, for me was climate change. And I just had more residents than I ever talked to in the last time or in between asking me what the city's doing around that. And again, they fell into 2 buckets. One would be around transportation, which we discussed, but sort of the idea that the region needs to make more transformational investment in transit improvements, that the city needs to encourage other modes of transportation, looking at things like e-bike rebates as an example, and ensuring that we are planning the appropriate infrastructure for electric vehicles. How we're transitioning our corporate fleet to zero-emission vehicles as well came up. And the second bucket there would be around buildings, a strong commitment to lowering the emissions from our corporate buildings to show leadership. Residents wanted to see a regulatory framework around new buildings, commercial and residential, that requires them to be net zero or net zero ready. And they want to see appropriate incentives to encourage existing buildings to lower their carbon footprint. Third theme for me was around affordable housing. My residents that I spoke to have advocated for a compassionate approach to dealing with the housing crisis in the unsheltered community. Concern, like Mary Lou said, around their children and grandchildren's capability of ever being able to purchase a home or being able to afford rent. And in particular, residents want to see affordable units included in new developments. They want to see the city permit more missing middle housing in more areas across the city. And basically, they want to know that the city is using all the tools in the toolbox to help address this crisis with short-term actions and long-term vision. And the last piece for me was around equity and inclusion. Residents want to see themselves reflected in the services that the city provides. They want to feel welcome in their community. They want to belong in their neighborhoods. Representing such a diverse community as we do, this needs to manifest itself in everything we do, from our committees of council, recreation, customer service, and more. We need to ensure voices of seniors and youth are well represented in our planning. Residents want to see a more accessible city, more accessible parks and services. And one of the great strengths of the city of Waterloo and the great privileges of raising a family in Ward 2 is meeting people from so many different backgrounds, and we need to find a way to harness that potential. And so, yeah, I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to contribute. Strat planning is my favorite thing from the last term of council, and I look forward to continuing on this journey.
Thank you very much. I wasn't timing. That's Sandy. Okay, there we go. We'll look to the judge over there. Was he on time? Did you get it? Okay. All right. And last but not least, Ward 1, Councillor Hamner.
Thank you. Last but not least, a lot of what my fellow councillors have said were similar themes that I heard as well as I was going around Ward 1. For sure, underpinning many of the comments were climate change and DEI, and how are we demonstrating as a city that we are more reflective of the communities and of the individuals that are living in our areas. Housing that's affordable, I heard over and over and over again. And we've talked about the missing middle. We've talked about rents that are appropriate. We've talked about access for seniors, access for new younger people who are coming into the area, and that's really an important component. It was interesting with some of the conversations around the seniors. My ward is predominantly residential. We have the boardwalk, and we've got a little bit of other shopping, but most of it is large single family homes, who now it's starting to turn over, except some of the seniors are in 4 and 5 bedroom homes that there is no other place for them to go that is affordable. Yet a 5 bedroom home would be very good for a young family starting out, and it's just not affordable to do that. So what can we do to help with that particular piece? Traffic calming measures, loud and clear. We've been working hard on that. There was not support in my ward for the 30 kilometers across the board. There definitely was support for 30 kilometers around the school zones, and wanting to make sure that we put that in place. And knowing that the vote had been taken already, there was a lot of questions about how I voted with respect to the lowering the speed limits. So it was the implementation that we spent more time talking about, and perhaps a gradual implementation. And I recognize that's not really a strategy kind of piece. That's really more of a operational piece as we look to measure how we're doing. Other traffic calming measures are important too, whether it's the bollards that get put in, or the signage, or other pieces that we can be putting in place to make it a little bit safer. I'm sure people are not surprised that I'm going to mention the roundabout at Ira Needles and Erb Street. It definitely hit probably every single conversation that I had, that something needs to be done in terms of the traffic safety around that. A lot of comments about pedestrians and cyclists, but also equally the cars, and just the safety that's there, because if there's a backup, then it causes all other kinds of issues. And then the sort of the last area was really active transportation and the connections across the city. There are a lot of individuals within the ward who are walking and biking. However, it's not easy to get to some of the other connections. There'd love to be a greater use of the LRT, for example, but to get to it, it's not an easy piece to do, and you end up driving to the LRT stop, which kind of defeats the whole purpose. And then the last area was park maintenance. And some of this, and I'll turn to Commissioner Dykstra, got caught up because of COVID. A number of the parks within my ward were due for upgrades or retreeing, and then COVID caused us some issues. So we're a little bit behind in that particular area, but it fits along with the whole idea of being active, being community-minded, and being in a neighborhood. So the parks and making sure that we've got upgrades to the parks will be important. I think that hits most of the things that came out of Ward 1 that haven't been said yet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So my thoughts are more overall, and then
a lot of the ones here were very ward-based, but I think there's a lot of themes there in terms of what I heard going across the city. And I would echo what Councillor Wright said. Elections are a really interesting time and an interesting opportunity to talk to people that you just don't generally get a chance to talk to. And a couple of things on the negative side I'll start out with that jumped out at me was that there's a lot of confusion about who does what in the continuing with our residents, who does what particularly around roundabouts and traffic calming and things like that. One of the things that jumped out at me as well, because I did spend a little bit of time in Kitchener, was that because I went with some Waterloo volunteers to Kitchener a couple times to help serve hot meals. And it just really struck me that and I saw people that I know who live in Waterloo in Kitchener to access hot meals. So it just really struck me that there's a need around something more we need to do as a community to serve people in need here, because it just didn't feel right that people have to travel from our community, even volunteers, to provide that service. One last negative thing was that I heard a lot from across the city that unfortunately the first answer often from City Hall is no. And that was just sort of soup to nuts, often around developments, but sometimes developments that are being proposed. Sometimes it's around bylaws, so various issues. But and the sense, as people said a number of times, developers run the city. I'm not saying those are fair comments. I'm just saying those are things that I heard. But I think the fact that the city is looking at the customer service strategy and the digital service strategy is really important to me personally, because I heard that quite a bit. Overall, I mean, I did also hear a lot about affordable housing, attainable housing, the need for everyone at every stage, age, ability, and income level to be able to find a place. That clearly is a big challenge. What I also heard from a lot of people was, yes, we need more affordable housing, but there was a real sense that they want it to remain public housing. They don't want it to be 25 years, 30 years, and then flipped into condos or something that's higher rent. Road safety, speeds, noise, heard that all the time, which I often pointed out to people. So your city council actually is trying to do something about that, but you're telling me that you don't want the speed reduced. So tried to gently point out sort of the juxtaposition of that position. But over all those things, for me, is climate change, because I think it's really important that we keep in mind that yes, we need more housing of every kind, but unless we build it to be climate friendly and energy reducing our GHG emissions, we have an opportunity now to make a really big difference. We all know that buildings and transportation are the two biggest drivers of GHG. We've got a ton of condos, houses, apartments, coming that are going to be built in the very, very short period of time. And I think it's really important that we do as much as we can to ensure that those buildings are going to have really good energy use and really drive down GHGs. If we miss that, there's no way we're going to make the targets that previous councils have agreed to. The other thing that I heard quite a bit too was community connectedness. People in a lot of places feel pretty connected to some of their neighbors, but there's felt like a general sense of people who really wanted to feel more connected kind of to the city, the corporation of the city, but also to some of the other organizations and within our city. And some of that's through, I think, like abilities to interact with people through park space, dog parks, but also but also feeling connected in terms of a sense of purpose. I heard a lot about, it's a great place to live, it's a great place to live, work, and play, but where are we going as a city? What's our next sort of big strategic, our big strategic goal that we're setting, and where are we really headed to as a city? And some of that, I think, there was a bit of the hospital, is Waterloo improving our, going to have access to site one of those, the hospital redevelopment, and people are very interested in things like that. But people are really interested with the development that's going on. They really have this sense of, I know there's a lot of towers going up, but if we can build these communities that have that retail on the bottom, those walkable neighborhoods where you really do feel like you can go and grab a coffee, you can go and meet your neighbor, you can go and have an interesting conversation with someone from another part of the city, people are really looking for that. They're looking for, I think, those 6 to 10 to 12 stories, maybe not quite so much as the high rise. I know I'm a little bit over time, but I think for me, what I heard kind of consistently was that that people want to feel like this is a place where they really feel like they belong, and that they're connected, and they're connected either to city council and staff can find information quickly when they need it, and that it continues to be an even more vibrant place to live, work, and play. So they do want to continue those economic development opportunities here too. So I took a little bit longer, but thank you.
Just a very sincere thank you to all of you for sharing your thoughts. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Our visit today and over the coming days is really about listening, and so we will take these comments and then continue to listen to the community through open houses, to the results of the Engage online survey, which is still open, and then through the coming focus groups, in particular, and outreaches to groups within the community. But today we can certainly hear themes emerging from around the table, and also from some of those early survey results. Themes around housing affordability, themes around certainly climate, roads, safety, and many other areas that where the information that we're getting and the things that are being heard by Mayor and Council are very meaningful as we step forward in the next stages of the strategy. And so with that, I will return to our presentation and talk a little bit about next steps. Okay, here is our map of the strategic planning process. And so we've moved through phase 1, which is our project initiation. It involves just the background reviews, community profiles, so some of that statistical information, the satisfaction assessment, which we reviewed today. Now we are fully into the engagement phase, and so that involves many different activities. We've discussed them. Already, from the Engage Community Survey to the open houses, in person and virtual, to the sessions with leadership, with staff. And then we will be having our council strategic planning session, which will be happening at the end of February. And that will be the opportunity to start really crafting and reviewing the vision, mission, and guiding principles of the City of Waterloo moving forward from 2023 to 2026. Then we will have our SCAN report, which will be reported back to you, of everything that's been heard and all of the background information that has been gathered. And that's when you'll start to see some of these different pieces coming together into some findings, which will then feed into phase 3, which is the strategy development. And so then there will be further opportunities for us to meet and to discuss the strategy before we get to a draft strategic plan, which will receive feedback and be modified to a final plan. And so that is our path forward, and so we will continue on with engagement as we go. So I just wanted to say a really big thank you, of course, to Sandy and to the staff who have been so helpful in every stage of this project, to the leadership team of the city who have also opened their doors and shared their insights with us. This has just been such a wonderful process to be a part of so far, and we're so looking forward to the next stages. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I don't know, Sandy, if you had anything more that you wanted to add before we turn it over to council.
Just through you, Mayor, and to the rest of council, this is just kind of a first step with council. If there's any things that you want to highlight that you're not hearing yet, any areas that you would like us to try and consider to focus on, we're still early on in the process, even though this work has been ongoing for the last year. This is still a very iterative process. There's opportunities to do that through the council workshop that's coming up on February 27th. And so, as Sarah mentioned, there's that opportunity to talk about the mission, vision, and guiding principles. And then we'll be having a follow-up council workshop in March. So we certainly look forward to having Deloitte come back and work with us as we continue to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandy. Council, any comments, questions? Oh, did you take longer than 5 minutes, Sandy? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Rowe.
I actually just wanted to add it to the record. I don't know if you're taking, specifics, but that the constituent concerns in Ward 6 around traffic calming, they also were not for the 30 kilometers. So I don't think I got one person that supported the 30 kilometer. And also, I didn't hear it from anyone else that I recall, but bike lanes. I had a lot of negative feedback about bike lanes. Again, it's the residential area that I cover. They are single-family homes with cars. So I think that correlates there. But I just wanted to mention that. And as Mayor McCabe said, the desire for community and connectedness was huge. And then people are looking for that now. So just to add, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Rowe. I do live in your ward, so just joking. Any other comments, questions? Nope. Okay. Thank you so much. Sorry, Councillor Freeman.
I just thought of something. Like I know that you're looking at different ways to collect information, and I just know that in my ward this time of year, everyone's looking for a family skate, and I have found in the past, like hosting a family skate in my ward and giving people like 3 weeks notice on a Sunday afternoon or something. It has been so successful as a tool for me to share information about new builds in the community. Like the library, I showed the library plans. I've showed plans. I don't know, I'm looking at Mr. Anderson. He probably knows, and the team, like everyone knows what they've, built boards for me. And I in this case, the Eastbridge neighborhoods, hosted the skate, but I think we could host the skate, and then if you have coffee and hot chocolate, like everyone will be there, and you can have like a little, like electronic input, or even just someone there talking to people. You would be amazed at how many parents are so keen to give insight, and there's a lot of, I would say, young adults there who also I think would give some insight. It's just a suggestion, but I have just found I bet you that Eastbridge gets 200 to 300 families out for that skate in a 2-hour time. It's just a suggestion.
Are these outdoor skate
No,
parks?
they're at Rims, so
Okay,
they book 2 hours of ice time. So on like a Sunday afternoon, and like maybe 1 till 3, and of course the Zamboni comes through midway, and everyone's off the ice and drinking hot chocolate. But I've just found it a tremendous way, because people aren't there for anything but recreation. They're not, the kids don't need to get their gear on for hockey, and they don't have to transition to the next thing. And I don't know. It's just a suggestion. And I also think that the library is such a great space, and not just at the east side, but all of the libraries. So.
Yeah, thank you for those suggestions. And yeah, I guess similarly, Uptown, the skate park, not the skate park, the skating rink in Uptown, and yeah, the libraries are good. And as Councillor Hamner said a few hours ago, the affiliate organizations are soccer and hockey and, I don't know, baseball and probably football and some other clubs like that are good places too to go. Anyone else? I guess neighborhood associations as well. I know my neighborhood association's having its AGM, and the home mine's a home association. We're having ours. It's all online though, but you could certainly provide some information, and I can share it with our home associations to get that information. Any other comments or? No? Okay. Thank you so much. I think as both Councillor Vasic And Councillor Bodley said, I share that I think strategic plans and the planning process are critically important for the city and for the community. And I thank you, particularly Sandy, for and Tim and the people who've put a lot of thought into the process that we're using and the outreach that you're doing, particularly to voices that often haven't been asked and included in these important discussions. So thank you for making sure that there's time in there for that. And yeah, looking forward very much to the next step when we have time to talk about it in more detail. So I will, with that, I'm looking for a motion to receive this as information. Did I see? Okay, Councillor Bodley, and seconded by Councillor Wright. And then all in favor, that is unanimous. And so thank you very much for your time, Sarah, Sandy, and Tareen. Okay, so moving on to the rest of the agenda. Consideration of notice of motion given at previous meetings. There are none. There are no current notice of motions. No communications or correspondence. Is there any unfinished business, Council? I would just, unless anyone has anything they'd like to say, I just wanted to do a really big thank you to our arts and culture team and to the BIA for hosting the Waterloo and the Comfort Food Crawl that just happened on the weekend. I don't know how many people. I know that Councillor Rowe attended and Councillor Wright. I know I was at one of the judges for the food crawl, Comfort Food Crawl, and when I walked through the square about 5 o'clock that night, one of the staff, I forget his name, from our arts and culture team said he estimated there's like 6,000 people who had just been at the skating area. So with the DJ going, so it was really a great event. Thank you to TELUS for sponsoring and to community volunteers like Matt Morris, who built 400 or 225 or so, I forget how many, snow gnomes and lit them, and it was along the path. So it really was talk about a feeling of, community connectedness. I think it's a really great example of that. And then through the Comfort Food Crawl, to the local businesses that contributed to that and the people who bought tickets and made donations to the food bank, they're estimating that about 12,000 meals were raised. So that's a tremendous contribution as well. So thank you to everyone who participated in that, who sponsored it, and who baked and cooked for the Comfort Food Cook-Off. So with that, any new business, any questions? Sorry, questions and then new business? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Freeman.
Under new business, I just also wanted to make a shout out to all of the volunteers who are working on outdoor rinks right now.
Oh, good one.
Just amazing what a contribution it is to our neighborhoods and neighborhood communities. And I also wanted to thank city staff who help facilitate those rinks to exist. And so, yeah, it's just so exciting.
Yeah, that is a tremendous amount of work in the very coldest time of the evenings for the people who do that. Anything else? Anyone? Okay. Oh, yeah, Councillor Wright.
Sorry, just one last note. I just also want to acknowledge the Forest Heights Collegiate Institute students who are showcasing their work at Clay and Glass this Friday. That does have a Ward 7 connection. There were contributions made by the community to that art project. And it was led by a Ward 7 high school teacher. So I just want to shout out to that whole crew and for making that connection to Clay and Glass. It's amazing for students to have an opportunity to show at a national gallery. Mm-hmm. It's kind of just a super opportunity for them. So thank you to Clay and Glass for making that possible too.
That's another good one. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so over to the enactment of the bylaws. The recommendation is in front of you. Would anyone like to move that? Councillor, sorry. Oh, we have to, okay. We have to separate the two bylaws. So bylaw A, do you want me to read it? Oh, Councillor, okay. Oh, sorry, Councillor, true. Councillor Roach and Councillor Hamner will need to leave? Oh. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. And Counselor B, your counselor, or, okay, they've separated into two. Okay, okay, so Counselor, they've split them, they've split the committees, so, okay, Counselor Roach, if we could ask you to vacate. No, yeah. We'll ask you to leave first, Counselor Roach. Sorry, Natalia. Okay, so enactment of the bylaws, the number A, bylaw to provide for the appointment of community representatives to the City of Waterloo on the Appeals Tribunal, Audit Committee, Committee of Adjustment, Fence Variance Committee, and the Waterloo Public Library Board for the term ending November 14th, 2026. Do I have a mover, Counselor Freeman, and a seconder, Counselor Rowe? All in favor? That is carried. Now, if you will go, Counselor Hamner, if you would leave and then get Counselor Roach to come back, thank you. Okay. Tagging in. Okay, so 14B, bylaw to provide for the appointment of community representatives to the City of Waterloo on various committees for the term ending November 14th, 2024. I need a mover and a seconder, moved by Councillor Freeman, seconded by Councillor Wright. All in favor? That is unanimous. Councillor Hamner can return. Okay, and our final one is the bylaw to confirm all actions and proceedings of council January 30th, 2023. I need a mover, Councillor Freeman, 3 for 3, and a seconder, Councillor Roach. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Motion to adjourn. Oh, Councillor Freeman. And seconded by Councillor Bodley. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you, council and staff and clerks. Have a good evening, everyone.